Freezing water tore through the darkness behind them. Somewhere above, his 7-year-old daughter waited for him to come home. But the woman bleeding beside him, the billionaire CEO who'd spent her entire life believing money could buy anything, couldn't buy her way out of this. One exit, 2 people. And Noah was the only one who knew which support beam would hold long enough for someone to crawl through. The choice would haunt him forever. But first, he had to survive making it. If you want to see how far a person will go to protect what matters most, stay with me until the end. Drop a like and comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The alarm clock buzzed at 9:47 p.m., dragging Noah Carter out of a sleep that had lasted exactly 3 hours and 12 minutes. He knew the exact number because he'd been counting since 6:35 a.m., when Ellie had woken him up coughing so hard her small body shook against his chest. He slapped the alarm off and sat up, feeling the mattress springs dig into his back through the worn fabric. The apartment was cold. It was always cold in February, but especially cold when you couldn't afford to run the heat above 60 degrees. He rubbed his face with both hands, pressing hard against his eyes, until colors bloomed in the darkness, then stood and walked to Ellie's room. She was asleep finally. Her breathing wasn't smooth, it never was, but it was steady enough that he felt his shoulders drop half an inch. The nebulizer sat on her nightstand next to a glass of water and her inhaler. He'd given her a treatment at 8:30, right before bedtime, and she'd fought him on it like she always did. "I hate that thing," she'd said, her voice tight and small. "I know, Bug, but it helps you breathe. It makes me feel like a baby." "You're not a baby. You're the toughest kid I know." She'd looked at him with those serious brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, and said, "You always say that, because it's always true." Now, standing in her doorway, Noah watched the rise and fall of her chest beneath the blankets. 7 years old, 2nd grade. Loved drawing more than anything except maybe mac and cheese. Hated her asthma, hated that they lived in this crappy apartment, hated that her mom was gone. He hated it too. Noah backed out of the room quietly and pulled the door almost closed, leaving it open just enough that he could hear her if she called for him. Then he moved through the apartment's narrow hallway to the bathroom, where he splashed cold water on his face and stared at himself in the mirror. 32 years old. Dark hair that needed cutting, eyes that looked older than they should, a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in 3 days because razors cost money and he had better things to spend money on, like asthma medication, like rent, like groceries that weren't just pasta and canned soup. He'd been an architect once. Not a famous one, not even a particularly successful one, but he'd had a degree and a portfolio and dreams about designing buildings that would last longer than he would. Then Sarah got pregnant and the dreams shifted. That was fine. He'd been ready to shift with them. They'd talked about moving somewhere cheaper, somewhere with better air quality for the baby, somewhere Ellie could grow up with a backyard. Then Sarah died. Not dramatically. Not in some tragic accident that people could point to and say, that's when everything changed. She died because a hospital gave her the wrong blood type during a routine procedure, and her body rejected it, and nobody caught the mistake until it was too late. She died because someone made a typo on a form. She died because the universe didn't care about fairness or love, or the fact that Noah Carter wasn't equipped to raise a daughter alone. That was 4 years ago. He'd been 28. Ellie had been 3. Noah turned away from the mirror and pulled on his work clothes, heavy canvas pants, steel-toed boots, a thermal shirt that smelled like sweat and concrete dust no matter how many times he washed it. He grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door, checked his pockets for his wallet and keys, then walked back to Ellie's room one more time, still breathing, still asleep. He left a note on his kitchen table in case she woke up. Bug. At work. Mrs. Kowalski is next door if you need anything. Love you. Dad. Then he locked the door behind him and headed down 4 flights of stairs because the elevator had been broken for 6 months and the landlord kept saying he'd fix it next week. Outside, the cold hit him like a fist. February in the city was brutal, the kind of cold that got into your bones and stayed there. The wind carried sleet that stung when it hit exposed skin. Noah pulled his hood up and started walking toward the bus stop 3 blocks away, hands shoved deep in his pockets. The neighborhood looked worse at night. During the day, you could see the old factory buildings and tell yourself they had character. At night, they just looked abandoned. Most of them were. The steel mill had shut down 8 years ago, and half the town had left to find work elsewhere. The ones who stayed were the ones who couldn't afford to leave. People like Noah. The bus was late. It was always late, but tonight it was really late, and by the time it finally pulled up, Noah's fingers were numb inside his gloves. He climbed on, swiped his card, and dropped into a seat near the back. There were only 4 other people on the bus: a woman in scrubs who looked as tired as he felt, 2 teenagers scrolling through their phones, and an old man who might have been asleep or might have been dead. Hard to tell. Noah leaned his head against the cold window and watched the city slide past. Boarded up storefronts, graffiti that nobody bothered cleaning anymore, a few struggling businesses with bars on the windows. This place used to make things. Now it just made people tired. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Kowalski. "She's sleeping. Don't worry." He texted back. "Thanks. I owe you." "You owe me nothing. That child is an angel." Noah smiled despite himself. Ellie had won over their 76-year-old neighbor within about 10 minutes of meeting her, mostly by asking if she wanted to see a drawing of a dinosaur wearing a hat. Mrs. Kowalski had been looking after Ellie during his night shifts ever since, refusing payment every time he offered. "You help me with my groceries," she always said. "We're even." They weren't even, not by a long shot, but Noah had learned not to argue with her. The bus jerked to a stop at the transit center, and Noah got off. From here, it was a 10-minute walk to the tunnel entrance, the service access point where maintenance crews entered the old subway system. The city had shut down most of the underground lines years ago when ridership dropped and budgets tightened. Now they just kept a skeleton crew running to make sure nothing catastrophic happened down there. Noah was part of that skeleton crew. He showed his ID to the security guard at the gate, a guy named Marcus who'd worked there longer than Noah had been alive. "Cold one tonight," Marcus said. "Yeah." "Storm's supposed to get worse." "Yeah." "You be careful down there. Heard there's flooding in the lower sections." "Always is." Marcus waved him through, and Noah descended the concrete stairs into the tunnel system. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees as he went deeper. His breath came out in clouds. Somewhere far below, he could hear water dripping. The maintenance station was a converted storage room lit by flickering fluorescent lights. 3 other guys were already there. Jimmy, who was 50 and had worked tunnels his whole life. Dev, who was younger than Noah and always looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. And Carl, the site supervisor, who had the kind of mustache that belonged in a 1970s cop show. "Carter," Carl said, glancing up from his clipboard. "You're late." "Bus was late." "Bus is always late. Leave earlier." Noah didn't answer. There was no point. Carl lived in the suburbs and drove a truck that probably cost more than Noah made in 6 months. He didn't understand what it was like to rely on public transportation that had been underfunded into uselessness. "We've got a problem in Section 7, Carl continued. "Water main's leaking, needs to be patched before it gets worse. Jimmy, you take Dev and handle it. Carter, you're on solo inspection for the northern branch. Check the support beams and file a report. Should take you 3-4 hours." "Got it." Noah grabbed a flashlight, a radio, and a hard hat from the supply rack, then headed deeper into the tunnels. The northern branch was one of the older sections, built in the 1940s, poorly maintained since the 1990s. The air smelled like rust and mildew. The walls were slick with condensation. Somewhere in the distance, trains that no longer ran left ghost echoes in the silence. He walked for 20 minutes, following the beam of his flashlight along crumbling tile walls and rusted tracks. Every 50 feet, he stopped to check a support beam, running his hand along the metal to feel for cracks or stress points. Most of them were fine, some weren't. He marked the bad ones on his tablet and kept moving. The radio on his belt crackled. "Carter, you copy?" He unclipped it. "Yeah, I'm here. How's it looking up there?" "Could be worse. Could be better. A few beams need replacing, but nothing urgent." "Copy that. Let us know when you're done." "Will do." He was about to clip the radio back when it crackled again. This time Carl's voice, sharper. "All units be advised. Weather Service just upgraded the storm warning. Heavy precipitation expected for the next 6 hours. Watch for flooding in low-lying sections." Great. Just what they needed. Noah kept walking, his footsteps echoing in the empty tunnel. The northern branch had always creeped him out a little. Too quiet, too far from the main system. If something went wrong down here, it would take a while for anyone to reach him. But nothing was going to go wrong. He'd done this job 100 times. Check the beams, file the report, go home. Simple. Except tonight, nothing was simple. He was about half a mile into the inspection when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Not dripping water, not wind through the ventilation shafts, something mechanical, something moving. Noah stopped walking and listened. There it was again. A low rumble growing louder. Then he felt it. A vibration through the floor. Faint at first, then stronger. His radio crackled. "Carter, you feel that?" "Yeah, what is it?" "Don't know. Might be it." The transmission cut off as the tunnel shook hard enough to knock Noah off balance. He stumbled, catching himself against the wall. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Somewhere close, metal groaned. Then came the crash. It was massive, deafening, a sound like the world splitting open. Noah dropped into a crouch, arms over his head, as the tunnel shuddered and heaved. The lights flickered. His flashlight beam swung wildly across the walls. When the shaking stopped, he stayed low for a moment, breathing hard, waiting to see if it would start again. It didn't. Slowly, Noah stood. His ears were ringing. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He grabbed his radio. "Carl, you there?" Static. "Jimmy? Dev? Anyone copy?" More static. The radio was dead, or the signal was blocked. Either way, he was on his own. Noah turned and started back the way he'd come, moving faster now. Whatever had just happened, it was bad. Tunnels didn't shake like that unless something catastrophic had occurred. A collapse, maybe. Or he rounded a corner and stopped dead. The tunnel ahead was gone. Just gone. Where there should have been a clear path back to the maintenance station, there was now a wall of rubble, concrete, rebar, broken tile, all of it piled 15 feet high and completely blocking the passage. Noah stared at it, his mind struggling to catch up. He was trapped. No, that wasn't right. There had to be another way out. The northern branch connected to at least 3 other sections. He just had to find one that wasn't blocked. He turned and started moving again, faster this time, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. His breath came in short bursts. Don't panic. Panicking wouldn't help. Just find another exit. There was always another exit. Except when he reached the first junction, he found another collapse, and the second junction, and the third. Every way out was blocked. Noah stood in the center of the tunnel, turning in a slow circle, his flashlight sweeping over walls that suddenly felt like they were closing in. His radio was useless. His phone had no signal down here. Nobody knew where he was. Nobody was coming. Then he heard something else. A voice. Faint, muffled, coming from somewhere ahead. "Hello? Is someone there?" Noah froze. He wasn't alone. He followed the voice, moving quickly through the tunnel until he saw light. Not his flashlight, but something brighter. Headlights. And then he saw the car. It was a luxury SUV, black and expensive looking, wedged at an angle against the tunnel wall. The front end was crumpled, the windshield cracked. The headlights were still on, casting harsh white beams across the rubble. Noah ran toward it. "Hey, are you okay?" The driver's side door opened and a woman stepped out, or tried to. She stumbled, caught herself against the car, and looked up at him. Even in the dim light, Noah could see she was bleeding. A cut above her left eyebrow, dark blood running down the side of her face. She was wearing a business suit, tailored, expensive, completely out of place in a subway tunnel. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had come half undone. She looked disoriented, like she wasn't entirely sure where she was. "What?" She stopped, swaying slightly. "What happened?" Noah reached her just as her knees buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground, holding her upright. "Easy," he said. "You're hurt. Just take it slow." She blinked at him, her eyes struggling to focus. "The storm. I was driving. The road collapsed." Noah looked past her at the SUV, then up at the ceiling of the tunnel. There was a massive hole above them, jagged concrete and rebar jutting out like broken teeth. She'd driven straight through the street and into the tunnel system. "Okay," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Okay. You're lucky to be alive." "Lucky," she repeated like the word didn't make sense. "Can you walk?" "I don't know." "Let's find out. Come on." He helped her take a few steps away from the car. She moved stiffly, favoring her left side, but she could walk. That was good. That was something. "What's your name?" Noah asked. She looked at him like he'd asked her to solve a complicated math problem. Evelyn. Evelyn Voss. The name didn't mean anything to him. "I'm Noah. I work down here. We're going to get out of this, but I need you to stay with me, okay?" "Stay with you," she echoed. "That's right. Just keep talking. Tell me what you remember." "I was driving. The storm got worse. I couldn't see. Then the road just opened up. You're lucky you didn't die on impact. You already said I was lucky." It bears repeating. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she winced and touched the cut on her forehead. Her fingers came away bloody. Noah pulled a relatively clean rag from his pocket and handed it to her. "Here, press that against it." She did, holding it to her head with one hand while the other stayed braced against his arm for balance. Noah's mind was racing. He needed to think, needed to figure out their next move. The tunnel was unstable. There were multiple collapses. His radio was dead, and now he had an injured civilian to worry about. No, not worry about. Keep alive. "Listen," he said, "the main exits are blocked, but there are maintenance tunnels farther down. If we can reach one of those, we might be able to find a way out." "Might?" "It's better than staying here." Evelyn looked back at her car. The headlights were starting to dim. "I had my phone. It's in the car." "Won't matter. No signal down here." "Of course not." "Can you walk? Really walk, I mean. We might be moving for a while." She straightened, pulling away from his arm. For a moment, she looked like she might argue, might insist she was fine. Then she swayed again and grabbed his shoulder. "I'll manage," she said. "That's not the same as saying yes." "It's the best you're going to get." Noah studied her for a moment. Even bleeding and disoriented, there was something sharp about her, something that refused to bend. He'd seen that look before, on people who'd spent their whole lives fighting for control and didn't know how to stop. "All right," he said. "Stay close. Watch where you step. And if you start feeling worse, you tell me immediately." "Fine." He grabbed his flashlight and started moving. Evelyn followed, one hand pressed to her head, the other trailing along the tunnel wall for balance. Behind them, the SUV's headlights flickered once, then died completely, plunging them into darkness except for Noah's flashlight beam. They walked in silence for a while, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Noah kept checking over his shoulder to make sure Evelyn was still behind him. She was, but she was moving slower now, her breathing labored. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Spectacular." "That's not an answer." "I'm walking, aren't I?" "Yeah, but..." "Then I'm fine." Noah let it drop. If she wanted to pretend she wasn't hurt, that was her choice. As long as she stayed on her feet, they had a chance. The tunnel sloped downward, leading them deeper into the system. The air grew colder. The walls grew damper. Somewhere below, Noah could hear water running, more than just a drip. A steady flow. That wasn't good. "Where are we going?" Evelyn asked. "There's a junction about half a mile ahead. If we can reach it, there should be an emergency access ladder." "Should be?" "I haven't been down this section in a few months. Things change." "That's comforting." "You want comfort, you picked the wrong disaster." She actually laughed at that. It was a short, sharp sound, more surprise than humor, but it was something. They kept moving. Noah's flashlight beam swept back and forth across the tunnel, illuminating crumbling brickwork and rusted pipes. Every few minutes he'd stop and listen, checking for sounds of another collapse. So far, nothing. But the tunnel felt unstable. He could sense it in the way the floor vibrated beneath his boots, the way dust kept drifting down from the ceiling. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said. "Sure." "Why were you down here? When the collapse happened?" "I work here. Maintenance crew." "That's it? You just fix tunnels?" "Somebody has to." "That's a terrible job." "It pays for my daughter's medication." Evelyn was quiet for a moment, then, "You have a daughter?" "Yeah, Ellie. She's 7. "Where is she now?" "Home. With the neighbor." Another pause. "You must want to get back to her." "More than anything." "Then we'll get out of this." Noah glanced back at her. She'd straightened a little, her jaw set, her eyes focused despite the blood still seeping through the rag pressed to her forehead. "Yeah," he said, "we will." They reached the junction 10 minutes later. It was exactly where Noah remembered it, a wider section of tunnel where 3 passages converged. And there, against the far wall, was the emergency access ladder. Noah felt something loosen in his chest. This might actually work. He crossed to the ladder and looked up. It disappeared into darkness above them, leading to a maintenance hatch that should open onto street level. "Stay here," he told Evelyn. Then he started climbing. The ladder was old, the rungs slick with moisture and years of grime. Noah climbed slowly, testing each rung before putting his full weight on it. 20 feet up, then 30. The flashlight clipped to his belt swung with each movement, casting wild shadows. At 40 feet, he reached the hatch. It was locked from the outside. Noah braced himself on the ladder and pushed upward, throwing his shoulder against the metal. It didn't budge. He tried again, harder this time. Nothing. "Problem?" Evelyn called from below. "It's locked. Can you break it?" "Not without tools I don't have." Noah climbed back down, his mind already moving to the next option. There had to be another way out. There was always another way out, except he was starting to realize that might not be true. "What now?" Evelyn asked when he reached the bottom. "We keep moving. There are other access points farther in." "How much farther?" "I don't know." That's honest, at least. They started walking again, following the tunnel deeper into the system. The sound of running water was getting louder now. Noah tried not to think about what that meant, tried not to imagine the floodwater rising, filling the lower sections, cutting off their escape routes one by one. "Tell me about your daughter," Evelyn said suddenly. Noah looked at her. "What?" "Your daughter, Ellie. What's she like?" "Why do you want to know?" "Because I'm trying not to think about the fact that we're trapped underground in a collapsing tunnel system, and talking seems like a better option than screaming." "Fair enough." "She's smart," Noah said. "Too smart sometimes. Asks questions about everything. Wants to know how things work. She draws constantly. Fills notebooks with pictures of animals and buildings and people. She's got asthma, which is why I work nights. The medication costs more than rent." "That's criminal." "Yeah, well, that's America." "What happened to her mother?" Noah's jaw tightened. "She died 4 years ago. Hospital mistake." "I'm sorry." "Everyone is." They walked in silence again. The tunnel curved to the right, then split into 2 passages. Noah chose the left one, following the flow of water. If there was flooding, it was coming from somewhere. Maybe they could trace it back to a breach in the system. Somewhere the collapse had opened a path to the surface. "What about you?" he asked. "You got family?" "No." "Nobody?" "I have a corporation, 12,000 employees. Does that count?" "Not really." "Then no, nobody." There was something hollow in her voice when she said it, something that made Noah glance back at her again. She was walking more slowly now, her steps uneven. The rag she'd been pressing to her head was soaked through with blood. "You need to rest," he said. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." "I'm aware." "Evelyn," I said, "I'm fine." She wasn't, but she also wasn't going to admit it. Noah recognized that stubbornness, recognized it because he saw it in the mirror every morning. It was the kind of stubborn that came from spending too long holding everything together with nothing but will and spite. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, some kind of old equipment room, long since abandoned. Rusted machinery sat in silent rows, covered in dust and cobwebs. And in the center of the room, water. A lot of water. It was pouring through a crack in the far wall, a steady torrent that had already filled the lower half of the chamber. The sound was deafening. Noah stopped at the edge of the water, shining his flashlight across the surface. It was deep, too deep to wade through, and rising. "Well," Evelyn said behind him, "that's not ideal." "No, it's not." "Can we go around?" Noah played his flashlight along the walls, looking for another passage. There was one, a narrow tunnel on the far side of the chamber, accessible only by crossing through the water. "We'd have to swim for it," he said. "In February? In a flooded tunnel?" "You have a better idea?" Evelyn stared at the water, her face pale. "No." "Then we swim." "I can't." Noah turned to look at her. "What do you mean you can't?" "I mean I can't swim. Not well. Not in—" She gestured at the dark water. Not in that. Are you serious? Do I look like I'm joking? She didn't. She looked terrified. Noah ran a hand through his hair, thinking fast. The water was rising. They couldn't go back. And if Evelyn couldn't swim, he couldn't just leave her here. Okay, he said. Okay. New plan. We'll take it slow. I'll help you across. You just have to trust me. I don't know you. Yeah, well, you're about to get to know me real well. Come on. He waded into the water, gasping as the cold hit him. It was even worse than he'd expected. The kind of cold that stopped your breath and made your muscles seize. Within seconds, his legs were numb. Evelyn followed, moving carefully, her teeth already chattering. This is insane. Probably. We're going to die down here. Not if I can help it. The water reached Noah's waist, then his chest. He could feel the current pulling at him, trying to drag him sideways. Behind him, Evelyn was struggling, her breathing coming in short, panicked gasps. I can't. Yes, you can. Grab onto me. She reached for him, her fingers digging into his shoulder. Noah wrapped an arm around her waist and started moving forward, half swimming, half pulling them both toward the far tunnel. The water was over his head now. He kicked hard, fighting the current, feeling Evelyn's weight dragging him down. Keep kicking, he gasped. Don't stop. She was kicking, but weakly. Her head dipped below the surface. Noah hauled her back up, his own lungs burning, almost there. Just a few more feet. His hand hit stone, the edge of the tunnel. Noah grabbed it and pulled, dragging both of them up onto solid ground. They collapsed in a heap, coughing and shivering. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They just lay there, breathing hard, water streaming off them in the darkness. Still with me? Noah finally asked. Unfortunately. Good, because we're not done yet. Evelyn sat up slowly, wrapping her arms around herself. She was shaking violently, her lips blue. The cut on her forehead had started bleeding again. Noah forced himself to his feet and looked around. They were in another tunnel, narrower than the last, and at the far end he could see something that made his heart skip. Light. Not artificial light. Daylight. Filtering down through cracks in the ceiling. Come on, he said, offering Evelyn his hand. We're almost out. She took it and let him pull her up. Together they stumbled toward the light, their wet clothes clinging to them, their breath coming in clouds. The tunnel ended in a steep incline. More rubble from the collapse, piled high enough that Noah could see the night sky through the gaps. He could hear the storm still raging above, rain hammering down. But they could get out. They could actually get out. Noah started climbing, his numb fingers scrabbling for purchase on the loose concrete. Evelyn followed, moving slower but still moving. They were halfway up when the ground shifted beneath them. Noah felt it a split second before it happened. The horrible sensation of everything sliding out from under him. Then the rubble was moving, cascading down in a thunderous roar, and he was falling. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. Above him, the hole they'd been climbing toward collapsed completely, sealing itself shut. And just like that, they were trapped again. Noah lay on his back, staring up at solid concrete where moments ago there had been sky. His ribs ached, his hands were bleeding, and somewhere beside him, Evelyn was coughing, trying to breathe through the dust that filled the air. He closed his eyes. Thought of Ellie. Thought of the note he'd left on the kitchen table. Then he forced himself to sit up. We're not giving up, he said. Evelyn looked at him like he was insane. Maybe he was. There's another way out, Noah continued. There has to be. You don't know that. No, but I'm going to find it anyway because my daughter is waiting for me to come home and I don't break promises to her, so you can sit here and wait to die if you want, but I'm moving. He stood, his legs shaking, and started walking deeper into the tunnel. Behind him, after a moment, he heard Evelyn follow. They walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes. Noah had lost track of time down here, lost track of everything except the need to keep moving forward. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness ahead of them, illuminating patches of crumbling wall and pools of standing water. Behind him, Evelyn's footsteps had become irregular, stumbling. We need to stop, she said finally. We can't. I need to stop. Noah turned. Even in the dim light, he could see how bad she looked. Her face was chalk white, except for the dried blood streaking down from her forehead. She was shivering so hard her whole body shook. They were both still soaked from the flooded chamber, and the temperature down here had to be in the low 40s. Hypothermia was setting in. "All right," Noah said. 5 minutes. But that's it. Evelyn didn't argue. She just sank down against the tunnel wall, wrapping her arms around herself. Noah crouched beside her and pulled off his jacket. "Here." She looked at it. "You need that. You need it more. Take it." "I'm fine." "You're turning blue. Take the jacket." For a moment he thought she'd refuse just to be stubborn. Then she grabbed it and pulled it around her shoulders. It was soaked through and wouldn't do much good, but it was better than nothing. Noah sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Body heat. It was basic survival. If they were going to make it through this, they needed to stay warm. "Tell me about your company," he said. Evelyn looked at him sideways. "Why?" "Because sitting here in silence is depressing, and I'm trying to keep you conscious." "I'm conscious." "For now." She was quiet for a moment, her head tilted back against the wall. Then she said, "I buy failing companies, restructure them, sell them for profit." "That's it?" "That's it." Sounds heartless. It's business. Business that puts people out of work. Business that saves companies from bankruptcy. If I didn't buy them, they'd collapse completely. At least my way, some jobs survive. Some. Not all. No, not all. She turned to look at him. "You think I'm a monster. I think you do what you have to do, same as everyone else. That's diplomatic." "I'm too tired to be diplomatic. I just don't have the energy to judge you right now." Evelyn almost smiled. "Fair enough." They sat in silence for a minute. Noah could hear water dripping somewhere in the darkness, could hear Evelyn's ragged breathing beside him. His own body was starting to shut down, muscles stiffening from cold and exhaustion. "How long have you been doing this?" Evelyn asked. "The tunnel work." 3 years. "You said you were an architect." "Was. Past tense." "What happened?" Noah didn't answer right away. He'd spent 4 years avoiding this conversation with everyone from social workers to well-meaning neighbors. But down here, trapped in the dark with a stranger who might not survive the night, the usual defenses felt pointless. "Sarah got pregnant," he said. "We weren't planning on it, but we were happy. Scared, but happy. I was working for a firm downtown. Good salary, benefits, the whole thing. We were going to move somewhere with better schools, buy a house with a yard." He stopped, his jaw tight. "Then she died, and I had a 3-year-old with medical bills I couldn't pay. The firm let me go 6 months later, said I wasn't performing. They were right. I wasn't. So you ended up here." "So I ended up here." He glanced at her. "Your turn. How does someone become a billionaire CEO before they're 30? The usual way. Rich parents, good schools, no conscience. You're being flip. You want the real answer?" "Yeah." Evelyn pulled the jacket tighter around herself. "My father built a tech empire in the 90s. When I was 12, he told me I was going to inherit it. When I was 16, he told me I wasn't smart enough to run it. When I was 22, I bought out his biggest competitor and forced him into early retirement." She paused. "We haven't spoken in 8 years. Jesus." "You asked." "Yeah, but I wasn't expecting patricide." "Corporate patricide. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Legally, yes." Noah shook his head. "Your family sounds worse than mine." "At least yours loved you." It was said matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but it hit Noah harder than expected. He thought about Sarah, about the way she used to fall asleep with her head on his shoulder, about Ellie's drawings taped to their refrigerator, about Mrs. Kowalski refusing payment for babysitting because that's what neighbors did. "Yeah," he said quietly. "They did." Another silence. This time it stretched longer, both of them too exhausted to fill it. Noah's eyes were starting to close when Evelyn spoke again. "Do you think we're going to die down here?" He opened his eyes. "No." "You sound certain." "I have to be. My daughter's waiting for me." "That's not how survival works. Wanting something doesn't make it happen." "Maybe not, but giving up guarantees it won't." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You really believe that?" "I have to." She nodded slowly, like she was filing that information away. studying it, trying to understand how someone could function on hope alone when logic said there was none left. Noah forced himself to stand. His legs protested, muscles screaming. "Come on! We've been sitting too long." "I can't." "Yes, you can." "Noah, 5 more minutes down here and we're both going to stop moving permanently. Get up." He held out his hand. Evelyn stared at it, then at him. For a second, he thought she'd refuse. Then she grabbed his hand and let him pull her upright. They started walking again. Evelyn kept one hand on the wall for balance, the other clutching Noah's jacket around her shoulders. Noah led with the flashlight, trying to ignore the way his vision was starting to blur at the edges. The tunnel sloped downward. That was bad. Down meant farther from the surface. Down meant deeper into the flooded sections. But there was no other way forward, so down they went. "Tell me about Ellie," Evelyn said suddenly. Noah glanced back at her. "What about her?" "Anything. I need something to focus on that isn't the fact that I can't feel my feet anymore." So Noah talked. He told her about the first time Ellie had drawn a picture of the 3 of them. Sarah, Noah, and baby Ellie, all holding hands under a smiling sun. About how she'd cried for a week when Sarah died because she didn't understand why Mommy wouldn't wake up. About the time she'd tried to make him breakfast in bed and nearly set the kitchen on fire. About her asthma attacks in the middle of the night, how she'd grab his hand and squeeze it while the nebulizer hissed, and he counted her breaths to make sure they were getting slower, steadier. "She wants to be an architect," Noah said. "Like I was. She draws buildings all the time. Not just regular houses, castles and skyscrapers, and these elaborate structures with bridges connecting them. She says when she grows up, she's going to build a house big enough for both of us and Mrs. Kowalski and anyone else who needs a place to stay." "She sounds remarkable." "She is." "You're lucky." "Yeah, I am." The tunnel opened into another chamber, this one smaller than the flooded room they'd crossed earlier. The walls here were different, older brick instead of concrete, with iron support beams running across the ceiling. Water trickled down one wall in steady streams, pooling on the floor. Noah swept his flashlight across the space and stopped. There, on the far side, partially hidden behind a collapsed section of wall, was a door. An actual door, metal and rusted but intact, set into what looked like the original foundation of some long-demolished building. He crossed to it quickly, his heart picking up speed. The door was locked, but the frame around it had started to separate from the brick. He grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. "Let me," Evelyn said. She'd followed him across the chamber, moving slowly but deliberately. "You can barely stand. And you've been pulling me through tunnels for hours. My turn to contribute." She positioned herself beside him, and together they grabbed the door and pulled. The frame groaned. The brick around it cracked. On the third attempt, the entire door tore free from the wall and crashed to the ground between them. They both jumped back. Dust billowed up in clouds. Beyond the doorway was a stairwell, going up. "There," Noah said, pointing. "See? I told you there was another way." Evelyn moved past him to look at the stairs. They were steep and narrow, disappearing into darkness above, but they led up, away from the water, closer to the surface. "How far do they go?" she asked. Only one way to find out. They started climbing. The stairs were concrete, slick with moisture and years of accumulated grime. Noah went first, testing each step before putting his weight on it. Behind him, Evelyn climbed slowly, one hand on the railing, the other still pressed against the wall. 20 steps. 30. 40. Noah's legs were burning. His lungs felt like they'd been scraped raw. But he kept climbing because stopping meant dying, and dying meant Ellie waking up to find out her father wasn't coming home. At step 63, Evelyn stopped. "I can't." Noah turned. She was sitting on the stairs, her head in her hands. "I can't keep going." "Yes, you can." "No, I can't. I'm done." "Evelyn, I'm done." She looked up at him, and for the first time since they'd met, there was something broken in her eyes, something that went deeper than exhaustion or pain. "I can't do this. I can't keep pretending I'm strong enough to survive this. I'm not. I've spent my entire life controlling everything, every meeting, every deal, every variable. And down here, I control nothing. I can't buy my way out. I can't negotiate. I can't even walk up a flight of stairs without collapsing. So just leave me here and save yourself." Noah stared at her, then he sat down on the step beside her. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Sitting. I just told you to leave. And I'm choosing to sit. It's a free country, mostly." "Noah, you think you're not strong enough?" he said. "You drove through a collapsed street and survived a car crash that should have killed you. You walked through flooded tunnels with a head injury. You climbed through freezing water even though you can't swim. You're still here, still breathing, still moving. That's strength. That's more strength than most people will ever need to find. That's desperation, not strength. What's the difference?" Evelyn didn't answer. "Look," Noah continued, "I get it. You're used to being in control, used to having all the answers. But down here, none of that matters. Down here, all that matters is whether you get up and keep walking. That's it. That's the only choice that counts." "What if I can't?" "Then I'll help you, same way you're going to help me when I can't." "I haven't helped you with anything. You kept talking when I needed the distraction. You pulled that door off the wall when I couldn't do it alone. You're helping just by still being here. Without you, I'd be sitting in the dark counting all the ways this could go wrong. Instead, I'm arguing with a stubborn billionaire about whether or not she's strong enough to climb stairs. It's almost entertaining." Evelyn let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a sob. "You're insane." "Probably. Now get up." This time, when he offered his hand, she took it without arguing. They climbed the rest of the stairs together, Noah half pulling Evelyn up the steeper sections. His shoulders burned. His vision swam. But he didn't let go of her. At the top was another door. This one was unlocked. It opened into a maintenance corridor, lit by emergency lighting. Dim red bulbs that barely pushed back the darkness, but were still the most beautiful thing Noah had seen in hours. "We're in the auxiliary system," he said, his voice hoarse. "This section connects to the old transit hub. If we can reach it, there should be exits to street level." "If?" "I said what I said." They followed the corridor, passing rows of electrical panels and junction boxes covered in decades of dust. The air here was slightly warmer, though still cold enough that Noah's breath clouded in front of him. His clothes had started to dry, stiff with grime and sweat, chafing against his skin with every step. Evelyn was getting worse. She was leaning heavily against the wall as she walked, her steps dragging. The cut on her forehead had finally stopped bleeding, but the dried blood on her face made her look like something out of a nightmare. "How's your head?" Noah asked. "Attached to my neck, so that's something." "Dizzy? Nauseous? Both? And before you ask, yes, I probably have a concussion. No, there's nothing we can do about it down here. So let's just keep moving, and I'll worry about brain damage later." "Fair enough." The corridor turned left, then right, then opened into a junction where 3 passages met. Noah stopped, trying to remember the layout of the old system. He'd worked in this section once, years ago, but the memory was fuzzy. "Which way?" Evelyn asked. Noah played his flashlight down each passage. They all looked identical. Concrete walls, flickering emergency lights, doors leading to maintenance rooms that probably hadn't been opened in decades. "Left," he said, making the choice on instinct more than knowledge. They took the left passage. It sloped upward slightly, which felt like a good sign. After about 100 yards, they reached a set of double doors marked Transit Hub, authorized personnel only. Noah pushed through them and found himself in a vast underground station. It was like stepping into a ghost town frozen in time. The platform stretched out in both directions, easily 200 feet long. Abandoned ticket booths lined one wall, their windows dark and empty. Wooden benches sat in neat rows, waiting for passengers who would never come. Ancient advertisements peeled from the walls, faded posters for products that didn't exist anymore, movies that had come and gone 30 years ago. The tracks were dark and silent, no trains coming or going, just emptiness and the echo of their footsteps. "This place is huge," Evelyn said, her voice small in the cavernous space. "It used to serve the entire Eastern District, back when there was an Eastern District to serve." "What happened?" "Economy collapsed. Factories shut down. People left. The city couldn't afford to keep the trains running, so they closed most of the stations. This was one of them." "When?" 15 years ago, maybe 20. Nobody comes down here anymore." They walked along the platform, their footsteps echoing weirdly in the vast space. Noah kept his flashlight moving, searching for exit signs. There had to be a way out. Stations this size always had multiple exits. Fire codes demanded it. He found the first one near the center of the platform. A stairwell leading up, marked with a faded green exit sign. But when they reached it, they found the upper portion completely blocked by rubble. The collapse had sealed it shut. "Of course," Evelyn muttered. They kept looking, found a second stairwell at the far end of the platform. Also blocked, the entire upper section caved in. A third exit, marked emergency only, turned out to be a dead end. The tunnel beyond it had collapsed years ago, long before tonight's disaster. "This is pointless," Evelyn said. She'd stopped walking and was leaning against one of the support columns, breathing hard. Her face had gone from white to a sickly gray. "Every way out is buried." Noah wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. The collapse had been massive. It had probably taken out half the streets above them. Finding an exit that wasn't blocked was starting to feel like looking for a specific grain of sand on a beach. He turned in a slow circle, playing his flashlight across the station. There had to be something they were missing, some route they hadn't considered. Then he saw it. At the far end of this platform, partially hidden behind one of the old ticket booths, was a service tunnel. It was smaller than the main passages they'd been traveling through, barely wide enough for one person. The entrance was sealed by a metal gate, but the gate was old and corroded. Noah crossed to it and grabbed the bars with both hands. The metal was cold and rough under his palms, flaking rust biting into his skin. He pulled. Nothing. He braced his foot against the wall and pulled harder. The gate groaned. The metal bent slightly, but the lock held. Evelyn appeared beside him. "Move over." "What are you—" She grabbed the gate above his hands. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. They pulled together. The lock shrieked, metal grinding against metal. Noah felt something give in his shoulder, but he didn't let go. Evelyn was making a sound that was half grunt, half scream, putting everything she had left into this one effort. The lock shattered with a sharp crack that echoed across the empty station. The gate swung open so suddenly they both stumbled backward. For a moment they just stood there, breathing hard. "Teamwork," Evelyn said finally. She was almost smiling, a ghost of expression on her bloodied face. Noah smiled back. "Yeah, teamwork." They entered the service tunnel. It was claustrophobic, the ceiling barely 6 feet high, the walls close enough that Noah could touch both sides if he stretched out his arms. The air smelled different here, less like mildew and more like metal and oil, like machinery that had rusted into silence. After about 50 yards, the tunnel branched. Noah chose the right path because it sloped upward. Upward was good. Upward was always good. The passage grew narrower. Noah had to turn sideways to fit through some sections. Behind him, he could hear Evelyn's labored breathing, the scrape of fabric against stone. She was still moving, though. That was what mattered. "You still with me?" he called back. "Define with you." Conscious and moving. Then, yes, barely. The tunnel turned sharply, then opened into a small chamber barely 10 feet across. And there, set into the ceiling, was a ladder leading to a hatch. Noah's heart jumped. He crossed to it quickly and looked up. The hatch was metal, reinforced, with a wheel lock on the underside. It looked heavy, industrial, but it was their best shot at getting out. "I'm going up," he told Evelyn. "Stay here. And if you don't come back, then you're going to have to climb up after me and kick my ass for dying." He started climbing. The ladder was solid, bolted directly into the concrete. Each rung was cold beneath his hands, and his arms shook with exhaustion as he pulled himself higher. When he reached the hatch, he grabbed the wheel lock with both hands. It was stiff, the mechanism probably rusted from decades of disuse. Noah put his weight into it, turning counterclockwise. His hand slipped. He readjusted his grip and tried again. It moved, slowly, grudgingly, grinding against itself, but it moved. Noah kept turning until the lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. Then he braced himself against the ladder and pushed upward against the hatch itself. It didn't budge. He pushed harder, his shoulders screaming in protest. Nothing. There was something on top of it. Something heavy. "Problem?" Evelyn called from below. "It's blocked. Can you move it?" "I'm trying." Noah repositioned himself on the ladder, getting his legs under him for leverage. Then he pushed upward, with everything he had left. His vision went white at the edges, his muscles screamed, but the hatch didn't move. He tried again and again. On the fourth attempt, something shifted. Just barely, but he felt it. "Come on," he muttered through clenched teeth. "Come on, one more push." This one harder than all the others combined, fueled by desperation and the image of Ellie's face and the absolute refusal to die in this tunnel after coming so far. The hatch shifted, then shifted more. Whatever was blocking it, debris, a car, a piece of the street itself, slid aside with a grinding scrape. The hatch flew open. Cold air rushed down, bringing with it the smell of rain and exhaust fumes and all the ordinary pollution of the city above. Noah had never been so happy to breathe smog in his life. He pulled himself up through the hatch and found himself in an alley between two buildings. It was still dark outside. Middle of the night, probably 3 or 4 in the morning based on the quality of the darkness. The storm had weakened to a steady drizzle. Streetlights glowed orange in the distance. A car alarm was going off somewhere. They'd made it. They'd actually made it out. Noah leaned back down through the hatch. "Evelyn, we're out. Come on." No response. "Evelyn?" Still nothing. Noah's stomach dropped. He scrambled back down the ladder, moving as fast as his exhausted body would allow. At the bottom, he found Evelyn slumped against the wall, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. "Hey." He shook her shoulder, gently at first, then harder. "Hey, don't do this now. We're almost out." Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused. "Tired." "I know, but you've got to climb. Just one more ladder. That's it. Then you can rest all you want." "Can't." "Yes, you can. The surface is right there, 20 feet. That's all." She looked at the ladder like it was a mountain. "You go. I'll follow." "Bullshit. You're coming with me. Now." Noah grabbed her arm and pulled her upright. She swayed dangerously, but he held her steady. He positioned her hands on the ladder rungs, wrapping her fingers around the metal. "Climb," he said. "I'll fall." "You won't. I'm right behind you. I won't let you fall. I promise." Evelyn stared at the ladder for a long moment. Then, slowly, she started to climb. It was agonizing to watch. She moved like someone in a dream, each motion disconnected from the last. Her hand slipped twice. Her feet missed rungs. But she kept climbing because Noah was below her, talking to her the entire time, telling her about Ellie's latest drawing and Mrs. Kowalski's terrible cooking and the way the apartment smelled like coffee in the morning. Halfway up, Evelyn stopped. "Keep going," Noah said. "I can't feel my hands." "That's fine. Your hands don't need to feel. They just need to hold on." "That's not how hands work." "It is tonight. Move." She moved. One rung, then another, then another. When Evelyn finally pulled herself through the hatch and onto the wet pavement of the alley, Noah heard her make a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He hauled himself up after her and collapsed beside her. For a long moment, they just lay there in the rain, breathing. The water was cold against Noah's face, but it felt clean, real, not like the stagnant floodwater below. "We made it," Evelyn said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yeah. I didn't think we would." "I know. But we did." "Yeah, we did." Noah sat up slowly, every muscle in his body protesting. He looked around, trying to orient himself. The alley opened onto a street he recognized. He was about 8 blocks from the transit station where he'd started his shift, which meant home was maybe a 40-minute walk from here. Ellie. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands. The screen was cracked, spiderwebbed with fractures. When he tried to power it on, nothing happened. Dead. "There," Evelyn said, pointing. Across the street was a 24-hour convenience store, its fluorescent lights blazing in the pre-dawn darkness. They helped each other stand and made their way across the street, moving like trauma victims, which they were. The store's door chimed cheerfully as they pushed through. The clerk behind the counter looked up from his phone, saw them, and his eyes went wide. His mouth actually fell open. Noah realized what they must look like. Soaking wet, covered in blood and grime, clothes torn and filthy, looking like they'd just crawled out of their own graves, which, in a way, they had. "We need to use your phone," Noah said. His voice came out rough, barely recognizable. "Please. There was a collapse. We were trapped underground." The clerk was already reaching for the landline. his hands shaking. "I'll call 911. Thank you." While the clerk made the call, his voice high and rapid as he explained the situation to the dispatcher, Noah turned to Evelyn. She was standing by the magazine rack, staring at a display of celebrity gossip rags like she'd never seen anything so normal and strange at the same time. "You okay?" he asked. She looked at him. Her eyes were unfocused, glassy. "I don't know what I am." "That's fair." The clerk hung up and turned to them. "They're coming. Ambulances and fire trucks. They said to wait here and not move. Are you hurt? Do you need water or—" "We're okay," Noah said, though it was a lie. "Thank you for calling." The next 10 minutes passed in a blur of headlights and sirens. Ambulances arrived first, followed by fire trucks and police cars. The alley where they'd emerged became a chaos of emergency vehicles and personnel, all of them trying to figure out what had happened. Paramedics swarmed them, wrapping them in those crinkly metallic blankets, checking vitals, asking questions Noah could barely focus on answering. All he could think about was Ellie, about how she'd wake up in a few hours and he needed to be there. "I need to call my daughter," he kept saying. "I need to let her know I'm okay." One of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes and efficient hands, handed him her cell phone. "Make it quick. We need to get you to a hospital." Noah dialed Mrs. Kowalski's number with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. She answered on the second ring, her voice rough with sleep and worry. "Hello? It's Noah. I'm okay. Is Ellie—" "She's asleep. She's fine." "But Noah, what happened? The news said there was a collapse near the transit station. They said people might be trapped. I've been watching and praying and I was trapped. But I'm out now. I'm okay. Don't tell Ellie anything yet. I'll be home as soon as I can." "Thank heavens. I was so worried." "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious. I'll explain everything later. Just take care of her if I'm delayed, okay?" "Of course." "Of course, dear. You know I will." He hung up and handed the phone back to the paramedic. When he looked around for Evelyn, he found her being loaded into an ambulance on a stretcher, an oxygen mask over her face, and an IV already in her arm. She saw him watching and raised one hand in a weak wave. Noah waved back. Then the paramedics were guiding him toward another ambulance, telling him he needed to be checked out, that he might have hypothermia or internal injuries or any number of complications from being trapped underground for hours. He was too tired to argue. He let them load him in, let them take his blood pressure and temperature and shine lights in his eyes, while asking him questions about his head and his memory and whether he felt pain anywhere. Everywhere. He felt pain everywhere. The ambulance doors closed, and through the window Noah could see Evelyn's ambulance pulling away, lights flashing but no siren. The last thing he saw before his own ambulance started moving was the alley where they'd emerged, now surrounded by police tape and investigators trying to figure out how two people had survived what should have been certain death. The last thing he thought before exhaustion finally dragged him under was that Ellie was going to have questions he didn't know how to answer, and that somewhere in another ambulance, a billionaire CEO who controlled empires was probably thinking the exact same thing about her own life. Noah woke up in a hospital bed with no memory of how he'd gotten there. The room was white and sterile, sunlight streaming through vertical blinds that cast striped shadows across the floor. His body felt like it had been run through a cement mixer. Every muscle ached. His hands were wrapped in thick gauze that made them look like oversized mittens. An IV dripped clear fluid into his left arm, and when he tried to move, pain shot through his ribs. He turned his head slowly and saw Ellie. She was asleep in the chair beside his bed, curled up under Mrs. Kowalski's old knitted blanket, her face pressed against the armrest at an angle that would give her a terrible neckache when she woke up. One of her hands dangled over the side of the chair, fingers slightly curled like she'd fallen asleep, reaching for him. Mrs. Kowalski herself sat in the other chair, awake, her weathered hands folded in her lap. When she saw Noah's eyes open, her face crumpled with relief. "You're awake," she whispered. "Thank the heavens you're awake." "How long was I out?" Noah's voice came out rough, like he'd been gargling gravel. 6 hours. They said you needed rest, that you were exhausted and hypothermic and had minor injuries but nothing life-threatening. She reached over and patted his hand gently, careful to avoid the bandages. "You scared us half to death, Noah Carter. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just don't do it again." Noah looked at Ellie, still sleeping, her chest rising and falling with the easy rhythm of childhood sleep. She okay? She was terrified when she woke up and you weren't home. I told her there'd been an accident at work, but you were safe. Then we saw the news. Mrs. Kowalski's voice dropped even lower. They're calling it a miracle. The whole Eastern District collapsed. Streets caved in. Buildings damaged. 12 people dead. And you were down there in the middle of it. I wasn't alone. The woman, yes, they've been talking about her too. Evelyn Voss. The reporters can't stop saying her name. Mrs. Kowalski leaned forward, her eyes searching his face. Is it true she's a billionaire? Apparently. And you saved her life? We saved each other. Mrs. Kowalski studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes seeing more than he wanted to reveal. Then she stood, joints creaking audibly. I'm going to get coffee. When Ellie wakes up, she'll want to see you're really okay. Try not to look so much like death warmed over before then. She left, pulling the door closed quietly behind her. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor and Ellie's soft breathing. Noah lay there, staring at the ceiling tiles, trying to piece together the fragmented memories of the previous night. The tunnel. The water. The endless darkness pressing in from all sides. Evelyn's face pale and determined as they climbed toward impossible exits. The moment the rubble shifted and he'd thought they were both going to die. The rain on his skin when they finally surfaced, cold and real and impossible. It felt like something that had happened to someone else. Like a story he'd heard, rather than lived. Ellie stirred. Her eyes opened, unfocused and sleepy, blinking against the sunlight. Then she saw him and sat up so fast the blanket fell to the floor. Dad! Hey, Bug. She scrambled onto the bed, careful of the IV line, but otherwise climbing over him like he was furniture. Her arms went around his neck and she was shaking, her whole small body trembling against his chest. You're okay, she said into his shoulder, her voice muffled. You're really okay. I'm really okay. Mrs. Kowalski said you got stuck underground, in the tunnels. She said the whole street fell down. Yeah, but I got out. The news said people died. Her voice cracked on the last word. Noah's chest tightened. He wrapped his arms around her as tightly as he could without disturbing the medical equipment. I know, Bug, but I didn't. I'm right here. She pulled back to look at him, her brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, searching his face for proof he was telling the truth. Her hands grabbed his face, fingers pressing against his cheeks like she needed to confirm he was solid and real. You promise you're not hurt bad? I promise, just tired and beat up, nothing that won't heal. Your hands are all bandaged. They'll be fine in a few days. Can you still draw with me? Absolutely. That seemed to satisfy her. She settled against his side, her head on his shoulder, and Noah felt something unknot in his chest. This was what mattered, not the tunnels or the collapse or the impossible survival, just this moment, his daughter safe beside him, both of them breathing. A nurse came in a few minutes later to check his vitals. She was young, efficient, asking questions about pain levels and dizziness and whether he could remember what day it was. Noah answered on autopilot, his attention mostly on Ellie, who watched the nurse with suspicious 7-year-old eyes like she thought the woman might try to take him away again. You're doing well, Mr. Carter, the nurse said, making notes on her tablet. Doctor wants to keep you for observation another 12 hours, but you should be able to go home tomorrow. Can I stay? Ellie asked immediately. That's up to your dad. Noah looked down at his daughter. You can stay as long as you want. The nurse smiled and left. Mrs. Kowalski returned with terrible hospital coffee in a foam cup and a bag of vending machine snacks that Ellie attacked like she hadn't eaten in days. The morning passed slowly, punctuated by more nurse visits and a doctor who examined Noah's hands and declared them healing nicely despite looking like raw meat wrapped in gauze. Around noon, there was a knock on the door. A man in an expensive suit entered, followed by a woman with a tablet and the kind of focused expression that suggested she was used to running the world from behind a screen. The man was in his 50s, silver-haired, with the sort of presence that made even a hospital room feel like a boardroom. His shoes probably cost more than Noah's monthly rent. Mr. Carter, he said, his voice smooth and professional. My name is Richard Morrison. I'm Miss Voss's chief of staff. May I have a moment of your time? Noah glanced at Ellie, then at Mrs. Kowalski. The older woman stood immediately. "Come on, dear," she said to Ellie. "Let's go find the cafeteria. I think I saw a vending machine with chocolate milk. But I want to stay with Dad. Your father will still be here when we get back. I promise." Ellie looked like she wanted to argue, but Mrs. Kowalski had already taken her hand. They left together, Ellie throwing one last worried look over her shoulder before the door swung closed. When they were gone, Morrison stepped closer to the bed. The woman with the tablet stayed by the door, her fingers moving across the screen like she was taking notes on everything. "Ms. Voss wanted me to check on you personally," Morrison said, "to make sure you were being taken care of." "I'm fine." "Good. She also wanted me to convey her gratitude. What you did last night. We survived together. I didn't do anything special." She disagrees, and frankly, so do the paramedics who treated you both. They said you had mild hypothermia, but she had severe. You had minor lacerations, but she had a significant head injury and was showing signs of shock. You stayed conscious the entire time while she was fading in and out. From their assessment, if you hadn't been there, she wouldn't have made it out. Noah didn't know what to say to that. The memory of pulling Evelyn through the flooded chamber, of talking to her on the stairs when she wanted to give up, felt distant and strange now, like something from a dream or a movie he'd watched. "How is she?" he asked. "Stable. They're keeping her for observation. Concussion protocol. She'll be here a few more days." Morrison paused, studying Noah with eyes that were too perceptive for comfort. "She's asked about you several times. Wanted to know if you were all right, if you needed anything. Tell her I'm good." "You can tell her yourself if you'd like. She's 2 floors up, room 612. I don't think that's... She'd appreciate it. And between you and me, Mr. Carter, Ms. Voss doesn't ask for things often. When she does, it usually matters." Morrison pulled a business card from his jacket and placed it on the bedside table. The card was heavy stock, embossed lettering that probably cost more to print than Noah made in a day. Then he gave a professional nod and departed with his assistant, leaving Noah alone with his thoughts and the expensive business card. Mrs. Kowalski and Ellie returned 20 minutes later with chocolate pudding cups and news that the hospital had pandas painted on the walls in the children's wing. Ellie spent the next hour describing each panda in meticulous detail. Which ones were eating bamboo, which ones were sleeping, which one looked grumpy, while Noah listened and tried not to think about the fact that a billionaire CEO was 2 floors above him, probably in a much nicer room, probably surrounded by people who could actually help her. What would he even say to her? Thanks for not dying? Good luck with the concussion? Sorry your car ended up at the bottom of a tunnel? By evening, Ellie had fallen asleep again, this time sprawled across the foot of his bed, with her mouth open and one arm flung over his legs. Mrs. Kowalski had dozed off in her chair, her head tilted back, soft snores escaping. The hospital had gone quiet except for the usual sounds of medical equipment and distant voices in the hallway. Noah carefully extracted himself from the bed, moving slowly so he wouldn't wake Ellie. His body protested every movement, muscles stiff and aching, but the pain was manageable. He found his shoes, cleaned by someone, though still visibly damaged, and slipped them on. The hospital gown they'd put him in was humiliating, but there was a robe hanging in the small closet. He pulled it on. Morrison's card was still on the bedside table, room 612. Noah didn't let himself think about it too much. He just walked out of his room, moving quietly past the nurse's station, and found the elevator. The ride up 2 floors felt longer than it should have. The 6th floor was noticeably nicer than the 4th. The walls were painted in warm colors instead of institutional beige. The lighting was softer, indirect, coming from fixtures that looked designer. There were actual plants in the hallways, real ones, not plastic. Abstract art hung on the walls. This was where people with money recovered from their near-death experiences. Room 612 was at the end of the hall. The door was partially open, soft light spilling into the corridor. Noah hesitated outside, suddenly feeling ridiculous in his hospital robe and borrowed slippers. Then he knocked. "Come in," Evelyn's voice called. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was easily twice the size of his, with a window overlooking the city skyline and furniture that looked like it belonged in a boutique hotel rather than a hospital. There was a couch, actual artwork on the walls, a flat-screen television. Evelyn sat propped up in bed, wearing a hospital gown but somehow making it look almost dignified. Her blonde hair was down, still damp like she'd recently showered. The cut on her forehead had been properly stitched and bandaged with white gauze that stood out stark against her pale skin. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes, but alive. When she saw him, something shifted in her expression. Relief, maybe, or recognition of a shared experience nobody else would understand. "You came," she said. "Your guy Morrison said you wanted to see me." "He's not my guy. He's my chief of staff. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Legally, yes." Noah smiled despite himself. It felt good to fall back into the rhythm of their banter from the tunnels, when words were the only thing keeping them moving forward. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I got hit by a truck, and then the truck backed up and hit me again." "You?" "About the same. Maybe add a cement mixer to the scenario." "Sounds accurate." There was an empty chair beside the bed, expensive-looking leather. Noah sat down, his body grateful for the rest. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was the silence of two people who'd been through something together and didn't need to explain it, who could just exist in the same space without performing. "The news is calling it the miracle of the Eastern District," Evelyn said finally. "Two survivors pulled from the collapse. They want interviews, photos, the whole media circus. Morrison's been fielding calls all day." "You gonna do it?" "No. You?" "Definitely not." "Good. We agree on something." Another pause. Evelyn shifted in the bed, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at something that hurt. She noticed Noah watching and waved a dismissive hand. "Bruised ribs, among other things. The doctors keep telling me how lucky I am." Her voice carried an edge of something dark. "Apparently driving through a collapsing street and surviving with only a concussion and some bruising counts as lucky." "It does when 12 other people died." Evelyn went quiet at that. "I know. Morrison told me. I've been watching the news. They've identified most of the victims. 3 were in cars like me. The others were in buildings that collapsed." She looked at her hands, fingers picking at the edge of the blanket. "I keep thinking about how arbitrary it was. Why did my car land where it did? Why did the tunnel hold long enough for us to get out? Why us and not them? There's no answer to that." "I know, but I keep asking anyway." Noah understood that. He'd spent 4 years asking why Sarah died from a clerical error while thousands of other people survived the same procedure. Some questions didn't have answers. They just had weight. "Morrison said you were asking about me," he said, changing the subject. "I wanted to make sure you were okay and to—" She stopped, her jaw tightening. "I'm not good at this." "Good at what?" "Gratitude, vulnerability, any of it." She looked directly at him, and there was something raw in her eyes. "But you saved my life multiple times, and I'm not sure how to repay that." "You don't need to repay anything. That's not how I operate." "Maybe it should be." Evelyn stared at him like he'd suggested she set her company on fire and dance in the ashes. "I'm a billionaire CEO. Everything operates on exchange, value for value, debt and payment. We survived together. That's the exchange. We're even." "We're not even. You had a daughter waiting for you. You had every reason to leave me behind and save yourself. But you didn't. Neither did you. You could have stayed at the bottom of those stairs, but you got up. Because you wouldn't let me quit." "Same thing." Evelyn shook her head slowly. "You're either the most stubborn person I've ever met, or the most naive." "Probably both." She almost smiled at that. Then her expression turned serious again, calculating. "Morrison did some research on you. I hope you don't mind." Noah stiffened. "What kind of research?" "Background, financial situation, employment history." She held up a hand when he started to protest. "I know how it sounds, but I needed to understand who I was dealing with and what I found." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You're buried in medical debt. Your daughter's medication costs more than your rent. You've been one missed paycheck away from eviction for the past 6 months. Your wife's hospital bills went to collections 3 years ago, and you've been making minimum payments ever since. That's none of your business." "You're right, it's not. But I'm making it my business anyway." "Evelyn, I want to help." "No." "Noah, No, I don't want your money. Why not? Because I don't need charity. This isn't charity. This is what? Repayment? A business transaction? Noah stood up, his hands clenched despite the pain it caused. I didn't pull you through those tunnels so you'd feel obligated to save me from my life. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because you were a person who needed help. That's it. That's the only reason. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. You're serious. Completely. You'd rather struggle than accept help. I'd rather maintain my dignity than become someone's pet project, someone's guilt management. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since Noah had met her, she looked uncertain, like she'd encountered a problem she couldn't solve with money or strategy or sheer force of will. Like all her usual tools had been taken away and she was left with nothing but honesty. I don't know, she admitted finally. I just know that I owe you something, and I always pay my debts. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. They stared at each other, locked in a standoff neither knew how to resolve. Noah could see the frustration building in Evelyn's eyes, the same stubborn determination that had kept her moving through the tunnels when her body wanted to quit. The same refusal to accept defeat that had probably built her empire. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice sharp. Tell me what you actually want, and maybe we can find some middle ground here. Noah thought about it, really thought about it. About Ellie and the crumbling apartment and the medical bills that would follow him to his grave, about the dreams he'd given up and the future he couldn't afford to imagine, about the job he hated and the life he was living versus the life he'd once planned. I want my daughter to grow up without worrying whether we'll have heat in the winter, he said slowly. I want her to be able to breathe without me calculating how many shifts I need to work to afford her medication. I want her to have opportunities I can't give her. I want her to dream bigger than survival. He paused. But I want to be the one who provides those things. Not you, not anyone else. Me. Because that's what being a father means. That's pride talking. Maybe. But it's my pride. And it's all I've got left that's actually mine. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, her fingers drumming against the blanket in a rhythm that suggested she was thinking, calculating, trying to find an angle that would work. What if I offered you a job? She said finally. What? A job. Not charity. Not a handout. Actual employment doing actual work for actual pay. I already have a job. Repairing tunnels for poverty wages that barely cover your rent. I'm offering you something better. Doing what? I'm not qualified for whatever corporate thing you're thinking. You're an architect, or you were. That was years ago. Another lifetime. Skills don't disappear. They just get rusty. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, and Noah could see her shifting into CEO mode, into the version of herself that closed deals and destroyed competition. My company acquires failing businesses. Part of that process involves facility assessment and restructuring. I need people who can look at a building and tell me what's worth saving and what needs to come down. People who understand structural integrity and urban planning and how to make spaces functional, not just pretty, functional. You're making this up. I'm not. I've been looking for someone to head up that division for 6 months. Everyone I've interviewed has impressive credentials from expensive schools and zero real-world experience. They can design beautiful buildings, but they've never worked in one that's actually falling apart. You've spent 3 years working in conditions that would make most architects quit on day one. You know how infrastructure actually functions, not just how it looks on paper. Noah stared at her. You're serious? Completely. Fixed salary, benefits, flexible hours because I know you have a daughter who needs you. She paused. And before you accuse me of making this position up just to help you, know that I'm a terrible person to work for. I'm demanding. I don't tolerate excuses. I expect results. If you take this job, you'll earn every dollar. It won't be charity. It'll be harder than anything you've done before. Why would you offer this to me? Because you're the first person in years who's told me no when I tried to give them something. That tells me you have integrity, and I value integrity more than credentials. She met his eyes. Also, you kept me alive through a tunnel collapse. That suggests a certain level of competence under pressure. Noah sat back down. His mind was racing, trying to find the catch, the hidden agenda, the reason this couldn't possibly be real. But Evelyn just watched him with those sharp, calculating eyes, waiting for his answer like she had all the time in the world. "I need to think about it," he said finally. "Fair enough. Take your time. Morrison will send you the details, salary range, job description, everything. Look it over, do your research, make an informed decision." Noah stood to leave, his head spinning. He got as far as the door before he stopped and turned back. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When we were trapped down there, you said your father told you that you weren't smart enough to run his company. Did you believe him?" Evelyn's expression went carefully blank, all emotion draining from her face like water through a sieve. "For a while. And now? Now I own 3 companies worth more than his ever was. So no, I don't believe him anymore." Noah nodded. "Good. Because he was wrong." He left before she could respond, walking back to the elevator with his head spinning. A job. A real job with real pay and benefits and hours that would let him actually be a father instead of just a provider. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But when he got back to his room and found Ellie awake and asking where he'd been, when he told her he'd just been walking and she accepted that without question, he couldn't quite shake the possibility that maybe, just maybe, something had shifted. That maybe surviving the tunnels had changed more than just his appreciation for fresh air and solid ground. The next morning, a doctor cleared him for discharge. Noah signed approximately 17 pieces of paperwork, accepted a prescription for pain medication he probably couldn't afford to fill, and let Mrs. Kowalski drive him and Ellie home in her ancient sedan that smelled like mothballs and lavender. The apartment looked exactly the same as when he'd left it 2 nights ago. The note he'd written for Ellie was still on the kitchen table, the ink slightly smudged. The nebulizer was still on her nightstand next to her inhaler. Her drawings were still taped to the refrigerator. Everything was the same. Except Noah wasn't. He couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn's offer, about what it would mean to have financial stability, to not lie awake at night calculating whether he could afford both groceries and Ellie's medication this month, to maybe, possibly, have a future that looked like something other than survival. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that accepting the job would mean owing Evelyn something, that no matter how much she insisted it was real employment based on real qualifications, there would always be the shadow of those tunnels hanging over it. The debt he refused to acknowledge, but that existed nonetheless. 3 days after leaving the hospital, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Carter? This is Jennifer Park from Voss Industries. Ms. Voss asked me to follow up regarding the employment opportunity we discussed. I haven't decided yet. I understand completely. But we'd like to schedule an interview if you're interested. Formal process. Standard procedure for all candidates." "There are other candidates?" "2 others, yes. Ms. Voss wanted you to know this is a legitimate position with a legitimate hiring process. You'll be evaluated on your qualifications and experience, not your relationship to her." Noah found himself smiling despite his skepticism. Evelyn was trying to prove a point, trying to show him this wasn't charity dressed up as employment. "When's the interview?" "Would Friday work for you? 2 p.m.? Friday was 3 days away. "Yeah, Friday works." He hung up and stared at his phone for a long time. Then he crossed to the closet and pulled out the box he'd shoved in the back 4 years ago. Inside was his portfolio, drawings and designs from his time in architecture school and his brief career before everything fell apart. The work looked amateurish now, the work of someone younger and more hopeful than he currently felt. But it was his, evidence of a person he used to be, evidence that he'd once been good at something other than surviving. Ellie found him looking through the portfolio that evening while she did her homework at the kitchen table, tongue sticking out slightly as she focused on her math problems. "What's that?" she asked, looking up. "Old work stuff." "From when you were an architect?" "Yeah." She climbed down from her chair and came to look over his shoulder, her small hands resting on his arm. "These are really pretty." "Thanks, Bug." "Are you going to be an architect again?" "Maybe. I don't know yet." "I think you should. You're really good at it." Noah pulled her into a one-armed hug. "You're biased." "No, I'm not. I'm honest. Mrs. Kowalski says honest is better than nice. Mrs. Kowalski's a smart lady." The interview was scheduled for Friday at 2 in the afternoon. Noah wore the only suit he owned, a charcoal gray thing that was slightly too tight in the shoulders now. He borrowed a tie from Marcus, the guy across the hall who worked in insurance. He took 2 buses to get to the Voss Industries building downtown, a glass and steel tower that looked like it had been designed specifically to intimidate anyone who walked through the doors. The lobby was marble and chrome, everything polished to a mirror shine. Noah felt profoundly out of place in his old suit and scuffed shoes, but he walked to the reception desk like he belonged there and gave his name. The interview panel consisted of 3 people, none of them Evelyn. They sat across from him in a conference room on the 15th floor, and they asked him about his education, his experience, his approach to structural assessment. They showed him blueprints and asked him to identify weaknesses. They presented him with hypothetical scenarios, a building with foundation issues, a warehouse with questionable load-bearing walls, and asked how he'd handle them. Noah answered honestly. He didn't try to impress them or pretend he knew things he didn't. He just spoke from 4 years of working in collapsing infrastructure and 3 years before that of studying how to build things that would last. He talked about what he'd learned in the tunnels, the ways structures failed that nobody taught in architecture school. At the end, they thanked him and said they'd be in touch within a week. Noah went home, made Ellie mac and cheese for dinner with hot dogs cut up in it the way she liked, and tried not to think about it. Tried not to hope. The call came 2 days later on Sunday morning while he was making breakfast. He almost didn't answer because it was an unknown number and he figured it was spam. But something made him pick up. "Mr. Carter, this is Jennifer Park from Voss Industries. I'm calling to offer you the position of Director of Structural Assessment. Starting salary is $90,000 annually with full benefits including health, dental, and vision insurance. Flexible schedule with the understanding that you have parental responsibilities. Does this sound acceptable?" Noah had to sit down. $90,000. That was more than he'd made in the last 2 years combined. The benefits alone would change everything. Ellie's medication would be covered, her doctor visits, everything. "Mr. Carter, are you still there?" "Yeah, sorry. Yes, that sounds acceptable." "Wonderful. Can you start Monday?" Monday was 2 days away. "Yes, Monday works." He hung up and just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Ellie came in wearing her pajamas, her hair sticking up in every direction. "Who was that?" "A job. I got a new job, Bug." "A good job?" "Yeah, a really good job." She climbed into his lap, even though she was getting too big for it, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Does this mean we can stay in the apartment?" The question broke his heart. He hadn't realized she'd been worrying about that. "Yeah, Bug, we can stay. We're going to be okay." And for the first time in 4 years, Noah actually believed it. Noah's first day at Voss Industries felt like walking into someone else's life. He dropped Ellie off at school at 8, watching her run across the playground toward her friends, backpack bouncing. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't have to rush from drop-off to catch a bus to a job site. He had time. He drove to the office in the used sedan he'd bought over the weekend with his first paycheck advance, parked in the underground garage, and took the elevator to the 15th floor feeling like an imposter in a borrowed suit. Jennifer Park met him at reception. She was in her 30s, efficient and friendly in equal measure, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than Noah's entire wardrobe. "Welcome to your first day," she said, shaking his hand. "I'll show you to your office and get you set up with everything you need." "Office?" "Of course. Directors get offices." She led him down a hallway lined with glass-walled conference rooms to a corner space with windows overlooking the city. It wasn't huge, but it had a desk, 2 chairs, a bookshelf, and actual natural light. Noah stood in the doorway staring. "Is this okay?" Jennifer asked. "If you need anything else, just let me know." "This is fine. This is more than fine." She smiled. "Great. I'll give you an hour to settle in, then we'll start orientation. Your computer login is on the desk. IT will come by to help you set everything up." When she left, Noah sat down in the desk chair and looked out the window. From here, he could see the Eastern District, or what was left of it. Construction crews were still clearing rubble from the collapse. He could see the street where he and Evelyn had emerged, now marked with orange safety barriers and surrounded by equipment. It felt surreal to be sitting in an office looking down at the place where he'd almost died. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Kowalski. "Ellie got to school okay? You didn't forget her lunch?" Noah smiled. "She's good. Lunch is in her backpack." Thanks for asking. Good. Now focus on your fancy new job. Make us proud. The morning passed in a blur of orientation. Jennifer walked him through the company structure, introduced him to what felt like 50 people whose names he immediately forgot, and showed him the systems he'd be using for project management and reporting. By noon, Noah's head was spinning with information. Lunch break, Jennifer announced. There's a cafeteria on the third floor, or you can go out. Up to you. Cafeteria's fine. I'll show you where it is. The cafeteria was nothing like Noah expected. It looked more like a restaurant than a corporate lunchroom with different stations serving everything from sushi to tacos to salad bars. And it was free. Completely free for employees. Noah stood there holding a tray, trying to process the fact that he could just take whatever he wanted and not pay for it. First day? A voice asked beside him. He turned. A woman about his age stood there with her own tray, smiling. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and wore jeans with a company polo shirt. That obvious? You have the look, like you're waiting for someone to tell you it's a joke. Pretty much, yeah. I'm Kate. I work in acquisitions. Been here 2 years and I still can't believe the free lunch is real. She gestured at the taco station. The fish tacos are legitimately good. Fair warning. Noah grabbed fish tacos. They ate at a table near the windows, and Kate told him about the company culture, the unwritten rules, which meetings actually mattered, and which ones were just for show. She was easy to talk to, asked about his background without being nosy, and laughed when he admitted he'd spent the last 3 years working in subway tunnels. That's actually useful here, she said. Most people come from consulting firms or business school. They know theory, but not reality. Someone who's actually worked with their hands? That's rare. I'm starting to figure that out. Just don't let anyone talk down to you. I've seen it happen. Some of these people think credentials matter more than experience. They're wrong, but they're loud about it. Noah appreciated the warning. After lunch, he went back to his office and started reviewing his first project assignment. It was a warehouse complex in the industrial district, the same area where he'd grown up. The company was considering acquisition, but they needed structural assessment first. Noah studied the preliminary reports, the photographs, the property surveys. Then he put together a site visit schedule. He was deep in the work when someone knocked on his doorframe. He looked up and saw Evelyn standing there. She looked different than in the hospital. Her hair was back in its severe ponytail. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Noah's car. The bandage on her forehead was gone, replaced by a small white steri-strip over the stitches. She looked like the CEO the media portrayed, except for the faint shadows under her eyes that suggested she wasn't sleeping well. Settling in? She asked. Noah stood up. Yeah, thanks for this, for the job. Don't thank me. You earned it in the interview. My hiring committee wouldn't have approved you otherwise. She stepped into the office, glancing around. This space work for you? It's great. Good. She moved to the window, looking out at the city. I wanted to check in, see how your first day was going. Overwhelming, but good. Jennifer's been helpful. Everyone has. She's one of the best. If you need anything, ask her. She'll make it happen. Evelyn turned back to face him. I also wanted to apologize. For what? For pushing too hard in the hospital, for making you feel like I was trying to buy your compliance or turn you into a charity case. That wasn't my intention, but I can see how it came across that way. Noah leaned against his desk. You were trying to help. I get it. I just needed it to be on my terms. I understand that now. Morrison explained it to me in very small words. He seems good at his job. He's insufferable but competent. It's a useful combination. She paused. I want you to know that this position is real. You report to the acquisitions team, not to me. Your performance reviews will be conducted by Jennifer and the department head. I won't interfere unless you specifically request it. Okay. I'm serious, Noah. This isn't me keeping tabs on you or maintaining control. You do your job well, you'll move up. You do it poorly, you'll be held accountable. Same as anyone else here. I believe you. Evelyn studied him for a moment. Do you? Because I get the sense you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. She wasn't wrong. Noah had spent the entire morning half expecting someone to tell him there'd been a mistake, that he didn't actually belong here. Old habits, he admitted. Hard to shake the feeling that good things don't last. They do if you work for them. Evelyn moved toward the door, then stopped. There's a company event next Friday, networking thing. Investors, clients, department heads. You should come. I don't know if that's my scene. It's nobody's scene. It's terrible, but it's useful for making connections, and you need to meet the people you'll be working with on projects. She looked at him directly. Also, I'll be there, and I'd appreciate having at least one person in the room I can have a real conversation with. Noah found himself smiling. Okay, I'll come. Bring your daughter if you need to. We're setting up a kids area with supervision. Several employees have children. Seriously? Family-friendly workplace policy. I implemented it last year after realizing half my staff was stressed about childcare during evening events. She shrugged. Turns out people work better when they're not worried about their kids. After she left, Noah sat down at his desk and stared at the door. Evelyn Voss was not what he'd expected. The media portrayed her as ruthless, calculating, emotionless. But the woman who just left his office was none of those things. She was thoughtful, direct, maybe a little awkward about normal human interaction, but trying. The rest of the week passed quickly. Noah conducted his first site visit to the warehouse complex, spending hours examining foundation cracks and roof integrity. He wrote his first official report, detailing everything that needed repair or replacement. When he submitted it, he expected pushback. Instead, he got an email from the acquisitions team thanking him for the thorough analysis and asking for his input on cost estimates. By Friday evening, Noah was starting to believe this job might actually be real. He picked Ellie up from school and took her home to change for the company event. She was excited about it, mostly because there would be other kids and, according to the invitation, a dessert bar. Do I have to wear a dress? She asked, looking skeptically at the options in her closet. You can wear whatever you want, Bug. She chose leggings and a sweater with a cat on it. Noah wore his suit, the same one from the interview. They drove to the venue, a hotel ballroom downtown, and found parking in the garage. The ballroom was already crowded when they arrived. People in expensive clothes holding wine glasses, conversations humming under soft lighting. A string quartet played in the corner. Everything was elegant and intimidating. Ellie grabbed his hand. This is fancy. Yeah, it is. Do you know anyone here? A couple people. Jennifer spotted them and waved them over. She introduced Noah to several department heads and team leaders, everyone shaking his hand and welcoming him to the company. Ellie stayed close to his side until Jennifer offered to show her where the kids' area was set up. There's a craft table and a movie, Jennifer said, and the dessert bar. Can I go, Dad? Yeah, have fun. I'll come check on you in a bit. Ellie ran off with Jennifer, and Noah was left alone in a room full of strangers. He grabbed a glass of water from a passing server and tried to look like he belonged. You made it, Evelyn's voice said behind him. He turned. She was wearing a dark blue dress, simple and elegant, her hair down for once instead of pulled back. She looked less like a CEO and more like a person trying to survive a social obligation. I did. Ellie's in the kids' area already. Good. I checked it earlier. They did a nice job with the setup. She glanced around the room. How long until we can leave without being rude? We just got here. That's not an answer. Noah laughed. You organized this event. Morrison organized it. I just have to show up and pretend I enjoy small talk. You're terrible at pretending. I know. It's a character flaw. They stood there together watching the crowd. Someone approached Evelyn to talk about a merger, and she excused herself. Noah wandered over to the food table and made a plate he didn't really want. He was considering sneaking off to check on Ellie when a man in his 60s approached him. You're the tunnel guy, the man said. Carter, right? Yeah, that's me. Tom Bradford. I run operations. Heard about what you went through. Hell of a thing. It was something. Evelyn told me you're working on the warehouse project, that your assessment? Yes, sir. Good work. Thorough. Realistic cost projections. We're moving forward with demolition based on your recommendation. Noah felt something warm spread through his chest. Pride, maybe. Or just relief that his work was being taken seriously. Thank you. You need anything, you let me know. We're glad to have you on the team. Bradford moved on to talk to someone else, and Noah stood there holding his plate, trying to process the fact that people here actually valued his input, that his opinion mattered. The evening continued. Noah talked to more people than he could count, answered questions about his background, explained his approach to structural assessment. By 8 o'clock, his face hurt from smiling and his feet hurt from standing in dress shoes. He found Ellie in this kid's area, covered in glitter glue and hopped up on sugar. "Dad, look what I made!" She held up a construction paper creation that might have been a dragon or possibly a very abstract cat. "It's beautiful, Bug. Can we get more dessert? How much have you had?" "Only a little." The supervisor nearby held up 3 fingers behind Ellie's back. "I think you've had enough. We should probably head home soon." "But I'm not tired." She was definitely tired. Her eyes had that glazed look that meant she'd crash hard in about 30 minutes. 5 more minutes, then we go. Okay? Okay. Noah went back into the ballroom to find his jacket. Evelyn was standing by the windows, alone for the first time all evening, looking out at the city lights. "Heading out?" she asked when he approached. "Yeah, Ellie's about to hit sugar crash territory." "Smart. I wish I could leave." "Why can't you?" "Because I'm the CEO. I have to stay until the end, shake every hand, make sure everyone feels valued." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." She turned to look at him. "Thank you for coming. It actually helped, having you here. All I did was stand around eating appetizers. You were real. Everyone else here is performing, saying what they think I want to hear. You just existed as yourself. It's refreshing." Noah didn't know what to say to that. "Well, I'm glad my social awkwardness is refreshing." She smiled. "Your daughter seems wonderful, by the way. I saw her earlier, covered in glitter, completely in her element. That's Ellie. She commits fully to whatever she's doing. Must be genetic." They stood there for a moment, the conversation settling into something comfortable. Then Ellie appeared at Noah's side, tugging on his sleeve. "Dad, I'm ready. Can we go now?" "Yeah, Bug. Let's go." He said goodbye to Evelyn and a few other people, collected Ellie's glitter-covered artwork, and headed for the parking garage. On the drive home, Ellie fell asleep in the back seat, exactly as he'd predicted. Noah carried her up to the apartment, got her into pajamas without fully waking her, and tucked her into bed. Then he sat at the kitchen table and looked around the apartment that suddenly felt different. The same cracked linoleum, the same peeling paint, but now it was just a temporary stop rather than a permanent trap. Now there was a path forward. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Noah worked during the day, picked Ellie up from school, helped with homework, made dinner. On weekends, they went to the park or the library or just stayed home drawing together. The medical bills started getting paid down faster. Noah bought Ellie new shoes without having to calculate whether they could afford it. Small things that added up to feeling like they were finally breathing instead of drowning. At work, Noah found his footing. He conducted assessments on 6 different properties, each one teaching him something new about how buildings failed and what could be salvaged. His reports were detailed and honest, and the acquisition team started requesting him specifically for projects. He saw Evelyn occasionally in the hallways or in meetings, but they didn't talk much beyond professional courtesies. She was always surrounded by people, always moving from one crisis to another. Noah understood. She had a company to run. He had a job to do. Whatever connection they'd formed in the tunnels was separate from their work lives. Then, about 6 weeks after he started, Evelyn showed up at his office after everyone else had gone home. It was almost 7. Noah was finishing up a report when she knocked. "Working late?" she asked. "Just wrapping up, you?" "Always. It's part of the job description." She stepped inside and closed the door. "Can I talk to you about something? Not work-related?" "Sure." She sat down in one of the chairs across from his desk. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just looked at her hands. "I'm not good at this," she said finally. "Good at what?" "Having friends? Or whatever this is." "Connection. I've spent my entire adult life keeping people at a distance because it was easier than trusting them, safer than getting hurt." She looked up at him. "But that night in the tunnels broke something in me, or fixed something. I'm not sure which. I just know that I can't go back to how things were before." Noah set down his pen. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know how to be a person outside of work. I don't know how to have dinner with someone without it being a business meeting. I don't know how to talk about things that matter without a boardroom table between us." She paused. "But I want to learn. And I think you're probably the only person who might understand why. Because we almost died together? Because you've already seen me at my worst and you're still here. Noah thought about that, about the woman who'd wanted to quit on the stairs and the woman who'd pulled the gate off the wall when he couldn't do it alone, about the CEO who'd offered him a job and the person who'd admitted she didn't know how to have friends. Okay, he said. Okay? Yeah, we can figure it out together. No boardroom tables required. Evelyn smiled. It was small and uncertain, but genuine. I'd like that. Me too. She stood to leave, then hesitated. There's a school event at Ellie's school next week, some kind of family art show. She mentioned it when I saw her at the company event. You talked to Ellie? Briefly, she showed me her glitter dragon. Evelyn paused. I was thinking, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to come. To the art show, if that's not weird. Noah was surprised, but not unpleasantly. You want to come to a second-grade art show? I want to see what normal family things look like. And Ellie said she made something special for it. Evelyn looked uncomfortable, like she was asking for something she had no right to want. But if that's too much, I understand. It's not too much. You're welcome to come. Really? Really? It's Thursday at 6, the school cafeteria. I'll be there. And she was. Noah arrived with Ellie to find Evelyn already there, looking completely out of place among the parents in jeans and sweatshirts. She was wearing slacks and a blouse, clearly coming straight from work, but she'd lost the severe corporate hairstyle. Her hair was down, and she looked almost nervous. Ellie spotted her immediately and ran over. You came! I didn't think you'd really come. I said I would. Do you want to see my project? I made a city, with buildings and everything. I'd love to see it. Ellie dragged Evelyn over to the display tables where her project sat. It was impressive for a 7-year-old, constructed from cardboard boxes and paint and what looked like an entire bottle of glue. Buildings of different heights, arranged along painted streets, with tiny paper people walking around. This is remarkable, Evelyn said, and she meant it. You built all of this yourself? Dad helped with the cutting, but I did the design and the painting and everything. What made you want to build a city? Because Dad used to build buildings. And I want to build them too when I grow up. But I want to build a whole city where everyone has a place to live and nobody has to worry about rent. She said it matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Evelyn glanced at Noah, something unreadable in her expression. Then she crouched down to Ellie's level. That's a wonderful goal. I think you're going to do amazing things. They walked around the cafeteria together, looking at other kids' projects, and Noah watched Evelyn slowly relax. She asked Ellie questions about her friends, about school, about what she liked to draw. And Ellie, in the way of children who haven't learned to be guarded yet, answered everything with complete honesty. After the art show, they stood outside in the parking lot. Thank you for inviting me, Evelyn said. This was nice. Different. Different good? Yeah, different good. Ellie tugged on Evelyn's sleeve. Do you want to come have dinner with us? We're just going to get pizza, but you could come if you want. Evelyn looked at Noah, uncertain. You're welcome to join us, he said. No pressure. I'd like that. They went to the pizza place 3 blocks from Noah's apartment, the one with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that only played songs from the 80s. Ellie talked nonstop about her classmates and her art project, and a book she was reading about a girl who solved mysteries. Evelyn listened like Ellie was sharing state secrets, asking follow-up questions and laughing at the funny parts. When the food came, they ate and talked about things that had nothing to do with work or money or the collapse that had brought them together. Just normal conversation, normal life. And for the first time since the tunnels, Noah saw Evelyn look genuinely happy. On the drive home later, after they'd dropped Evelyn at her car, Ellie said, I like her. She's nice. Yeah, Bug, she is. Is she your friend? Noah thought about it. Yeah, I think she is. Good. You should have friends. Mrs. Kowalski says friends are important. Mrs. Kowalski's right. That night, after Ellie was asleep, Noah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When he opened it, he recognized Evelyn's direct, economical writing style. Thank you for tonight. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed an evening that much. Also, Ellie is wonderful. You're doing a good job with her. Noah typed back, Thanks, and you're welcome anytime. Pizza place is our regular Friday spot if you want to make it a thing. The response came quickly. I'd like that. And somehow, without planning it or forcing it, they fell into a rhythm. Friday pizza dinners, weekend trips to the park where Evelyn looked completely out of place on the playground but gamely pushed Ellie on the swings anyway. Late-night phone calls when Evelyn couldn't sleep and Noah was still up doing paperwork. They talked about everything, about their childhoods and their failures and their fears, about what it felt like to almost die and what it meant to keep living afterward, about the weight of responsibility and the fear of not being enough. Slowly, carefully, they became friends. Real friends. The kind who showed up for each other without keeping score. And Noah started to realize that the tunnels hadn't just saved their lives. They'd cracked both of them open in ways that made connection possible, made vulnerability something other than weakness. 3 months after he started at Voss Industries, Noah was leaving work when he found Evelyn sitting in her car in the parking garage, crying. He knocked on the window. She looked up, startled, then quickly wiped her eyes. "Sorry," she said when she rolled down the window. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. What happened?" "Nothing. Just a bad day." Noah opened the passenger door and got in. "Talk to me." For a moment he thought she'd refuse. Then the words came tumbling out, about an acquisition that had fallen through, about investors second-guessing her decisions, about feeling like no matter how successful she became, it would never be enough to prove she deserved it. "I'm tired," she admitted finally. "I'm so tired of having to be perfect all the time, of never being allowed to fail or show weakness or just be human." Noah understood that better than she knew. "You don't have to be perfect with me. You can just be Evelyn, the person, not the CEO." She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "I don't know if I know how to be just Evelyn anymore." "Then we'll figure it out. Same way we figured out the tunnels. One step at a time." She laughed, a broken sound that was half sob. "Everything comes back to those tunnels." "Yeah, I guess it does." They sat there in the parking garage until Evelyn stopped crying and started talking about other things. About the book she was reading, about a restaurant she wanted to try, about normal human things that had nothing to do with business or success or proving anything to anyone. And when Noah finally went home that night, he realized something had shifted again, that what had started as survival had become friendship, and friendship was slowly becoming something deeper, something neither of them had names for yet, but both recognized as important, something worth protecting, worth nurturing, worth the risk of being hurt. Because some connections, once formed, changed everything that came after. 6 months after the collapse, Noah stood in the Eastern District watching bulldozers tear down what remained of the old warehouse district, the same streets where he'd grown up, where Sarah had lived before they got married, where he'd once imagined building a different kind of future, all of it coming down to make room for something new. Evelyn stood beside him, hands in her coat pockets, watching the same destruction with different eyes. "The city approved the redevelopment plan," she said. "Mixed-use residential and commercial. Affordable housing units included in the proposal." "Because you insisted on it. Because it was the right thing to do. These neighborhoods died because companies abandoned them. The least we can do is build something that actually serves the people who stayed." Noah glanced at her. "You've changed." "So have you." She wasn't wrong. The man who'd entered those tunnels 6 months ago had been surviving, not living, working a job he hated to pay bills he couldn't afford, raising a daughter while drowning in the kind of exhaustion that became background noise. That man had been one missed paycheck from catastrophe, one emergency from collapse. This version of Noah still worked hard, still worried about Ellie, still carried the weight of being a single father. But now he had room to breathe, room to imagine, room to be more than just a collection of obligations and fears. "Ellie's school called yesterday," he said. "They want to put her in the advanced learning program. Said she's testing above grade level and everything." "That doesn't surprise me. She's brilliant. She gets it from her mom." Noah paused. "Sarah would have loved this, seeing Ellie thrive, seeing us stable." "You talk about her more now, about Sarah." "Yeah, it used to hurt too much, but lately it just feels like remembering instead of grieving." They stood there watching the bulldozers work, and Noah thought about all the things that had brought them to this moment. The random chance of a storm and a collapsing street, the impossible survival, the job offer, and the friendship that had grown from shared trauma into something neither of them had expected. "I have a proposition for you," Evelyn said suddenly. "Another one? The last one turned out okay, I guess." She smiled. "This one's bigger. The redevelopment project needs someone to oversee the residential design and construction. Someone who understands what these neighborhoods actually need instead of what looks good in marketing materials. Someone who gives a damn about the people who live there. Noah turned to face her fully. You're offering me the project? I'm offering you the position of lead architect and project director, full creative control over the residential sections. You'd be working with city planners, community organizers, the people who actually live here. Your job would be to design something that works for them, not for investors. That's a massive project. You can handle it. I've been working for you for 6 months, Evelyn. 6 months ago, I was repairing subway tunnels. And before that, you were an architect with a degree and a vision. You haven't lost that. You just stopped believing in it. She met his eyes. I believe in it. I believe in you. The question is whether you believe in yourself. Noah looked back at the demolition site, at the empty lots that would become homes, at the possibility of building something that mattered instead of just assessing what was broken. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. The position doesn't exist for anyone else. That evening, Noah talked to Ellie about it over dinner. She was working on homework at the kitchen table, tongue stuck out in concentration as she drew the water cycle for science class. Hey, Bug, can I ask you something? Sure. She didn't look up from her drawing. What if I told you I might take a new job? Still at the same company, but doing something different, something bigger. Now she looked up. Would you still have time to pick me up from school? Yeah, that wouldn't change. Would we have to move? No, we'd stay here. Then okay. She went back to her drawing. What's the job? Designing buildings, like I used to do, but for people who need them instead of people who can afford them. Ellie considered this. Like the house I want to build when I grow up? The one where everyone has a place? Yeah, Bug. Exactly like that. Then you should do it. You're good at building things. Noah pulled her into a hug, pressing his face against her hair. When did you get so smart? I was always smart. You just noticed. He laughed. Fair point. The next day he told Evelyn yes. The project consumed the next 4 months. Noah worked with community groups and local organizations, holding meetings in church basements and community centers, listening to what people actually needed. Not luxury apartments or trendy lofts, but solid housing with reasonable rent and good schools nearby. Places where families could put down roots instead of just surviving until they could afford to leave. The design phase was brutal. Noah fought with city planners over zoning, argued with contractors over cost-cutting measures that would compromise quality, pushed back against investors who wanted higher-end units that would price out the people who actually lived in the neighborhood. Evelyn backed him on every fight, using her influence and money to make sure the project stayed true to its purpose. You're making enemies, she told him one night when they were reviewing blueprints in his office. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, but they were still there, fueled by coffee and stubborn determination. Let them be enemies. I'm not designing buildings for people who'll never live in them. Good. Don't compromise on this. It matters too much. It matters to you too, Noah observed. This project, you could have developed it as luxury condos and made 3 times the profit. Money isn't the point anymore. When did that happen? Evelyn set down the blueprint she'd been studying. When I realized that spending my life proving my father wrong was just another way of letting him control me. When I understood that building wealth meant nothing if I never built anything worth having. What changed your mind? You did. You and Ellie and Friday night pizza dinners. Watching you be a father and a professional and a person who gives a damn about more than just surviving. It made me want to be more than just successful. It made me want to matter. Noah didn't know what to say to that. The weight of it, the honesty, felt too big for the small office and the late hour. You matter, he said finally. You've always mattered. You just forgot for a while. Evelyn smiled, but there was something sad in it. I don't think I ever knew in the first place. They went back to the blueprints, but something had shifted between them. Something that had been building for months, maybe since the tunnels, maybe since the first Friday pizza dinner when Evelyn had laughed at one of Ellie's terrible jokes and looked surprised by her own happiness. Neither of them acknowledged it out loud. Not yet. There was too much work to do, too many complications to navigate. But it was there, humming beneath every conversation and shared glance. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, Noah took Ellie to the project site to show her the foundations they'd started pouring. She was fascinated by everything, asking questions about load-bearing walls and why buildings needed basements, and how they made sure everything stayed level. "Can I help?" she asked. "Not with the actual construction, but you can help me check the measurements." He handed her the plans and showed her how to read them, watching her serious face as she studied the drawings. She was so much like Sarah in moments like this, curious and focused and completely unafraid of complicated things. "Dad? Yeah, Bug? Are you happy now?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean? You smile more than you used to, and you don't look tired all the time, so I was wondering if you're happy." Noah crouched down to her level. "Yeah, Bug. I'm happy. Are you happy?" "Yeah, I like our life now. I like that you're home more. I like Evelyn. I like that we don't have to worry about stuff as much." She paused. "Do you think Mom would be happy too? About how things are now?" Noah's throat tightened. "I think she'd be proud of you, and proud of us for figuring out how to keep going." "I miss her sometimes." "Me too. It's okay to miss her." "I know, but it doesn't hurt as much anymore. Is that bad?" "No, sweetheart. That's healing. That's what's supposed to happen." Ellie hugged him, her small arms tight around his neck, and Noah held her there on the construction site surrounded by the skeleton of buildings that would become homes. Held her, and thought about Sarah and survival and the difference between existing and actually living. That night, Evelyn came over for dinner. It had become routine, her showing up on Saturday evenings with wine for the adults and sparkling cider for Ellie, staying to help with dishes and homework and bedtime stories. Mrs. Kowalski had stopped acting surprised by it weeks ago. After Ellie was asleep, Noah and Evelyn sat on the apartment's small balcony, the one that overlooked the street and caught the noise from the bar 3 buildings down. It wasn't fancy or quiet, but it was theirs. "I have to tell you something," Evelyn said. Noah looked at her. "That sounds ominous." "It's not bad, just complicated." She took a breath. "My father reached out, first time in 8 years. He wants to have dinner, to talk." "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell. Part of me wants to hear what he has to say, and part of me doesn't care either way anymore, which might be the healthiest option." "What would you tell him if you went?" Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "That he was wrong about me. That I built something bigger than he ever did, and I did it without becoming him. That I learned how to be a person instead of just a CEO, and it turns out that's harder and more important than anything he ever taught me." "Sounds like you have your answer." "Do I?" "You don't need his approval anymore. That's the answer. Whether you have dinner with him or not is just details." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, looking up at the sky. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably somewhere between the flooded tunnel and the second time Ellie convinced me to watch the same kid's movie 3 nights in a row." She laughed, and Noah thought about how different that sound was now compared to 6 months ago. How it came easier, lasted longer, reached her eyes. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Always. Why are you really here? Not just tonight, but all of this. The Friday dinners and the Saturday visits and the 3-hour conversations about nothing. What are you getting out of it?" Evelyn turned to look at him directly. "Permission to be human, a reason to care about something other than quarterly earnings. A family that actually feels like family instead of a business arrangement." She paused. "You. I'm here because of you. Because you're the first person in years who's seen me as Evelyn instead of Evelyn Voss, CEO, and I don't want to lose that." Noah's heart was hammering. "You're not going to lose it." "How do you know?" "Because I'm not going anywhere. Neither is Ellie. We're here. We're staying. Even though I'm complicated and terrible at emotional vulnerability and probably going to mess this up somehow, even though." Noah reached over and took her hand. "We're all complicated. We're all terrible at something. The trick is finding people who think your particular brand of complicated is worth dealing with." Evelyn's fingers tightened around his. "Is it worth dealing with?" "Yeah, it really is." They sat there holding hands on the balcony while the city hummed around them, and Noah thought about the impossibility of this moment. How 6 months ago he'd been trapped in a tunnel with a stranger, both of them certain they were going to die. How that stranger had become a friend, then family, then something more that they were still figuring out how to name. How survival had turned into living, and living had turned into something that looked like hope. The redevelopment project broke ground officially in October. There was a ceremony with the mayor and city council members and community leaders, everyone taking turns with a ceremonial shovel while cameras flashed. Noah stood next to Evelyn, watching her give a speech about economic development and community investment, and he could see the difference between this version of her and the one who'd climbed out of those tunnels. This Evelyn still commanded the room, still spoke with authority and precision, but there was warmth there now, connection. She talked about the families who would live in these buildings, the children who would grow up in this neighborhood, the community they were building together instead of imposing from above. After the ceremony, a reporter asked if the collapse 6 months ago had influenced the project's direction. Evelyn looked at Noah before answering. It taught me that what we build matters more than how much it costs, that some things are worth more than profit margins, and that the strongest structures aren't the ones that look impressive from the outside, but the ones that actually support the weight of real lives. That night, there was a small celebration at the project site. Just the core team and some community members, nothing fancy. Someone brought a grill. Someone else brought folding chairs. Kids ran around the construction site like it was a playground while adults talked about what was coming. Ellie was playing with some of the other kids when one of them asked her what her dad did. "He builds houses for people," she said proudly, "and my friend Evelyn helps. They're making a whole neighborhood where everyone can afford to live." Noah overheard it and felt something swell in his chest. Pride, maybe. Or just the recognition that his daughter understood what mattered. Later, as things were winding down, Evelyn found him standing at the edge of the site, looking at the foundation work. "Thinking about the future?" she asked. "Thinking about how different things are from where I thought they'd be. Better or worse?" "Better. Definitely better." He turned to face her. "I know we haven't really talked about what this is, what we are to each other, but I need you to know that you've changed my life. Both our lives, Ellie's and mine. You gave us more than just a job and financial stability. You gave us a future that looks like something worth having." Evelyn's eyes were bright in the fading light. "You did the same for me. Showed me what it meant to care about something beyond success, to be part of something real. So what do we do about it?" "I don't know. I've never been good at this part." "Me neither. I haven't dated anyone since Sarah died. Haven't wanted to. But with you, it's different. It doesn't feel like replacing her. It feels like building something new while still honoring what I had." "I like that. Building something new." Evelyn stepped closer. "I'm probably going to be terrible at this. At being a partner or whatever we're calling it. At being part of a family unit. I'll work too much and forget important dates and mess up in ways I can't even predict yet. And I'll be overprotective of Ellie and probably let my insecurities about money and stability ruin perfectly good moments. We'll both mess up. But maybe we can figure it out together." "Together." I like the sound of that. Noah kissed her. It was gentle and tentative, both of them figuring out how to be vulnerable in a different way. When they pulled apart, Evelyn was smiling. "That was nice," she said. "Very articulate." "Shut up, I'm new at this." They stood there together as the sun set over the construction site, and Noah thought about the journey from those dark tunnels to this moment. About how sometimes the worst things led to the best ones. How survival was just the beginning, not the end. How the people who saved your life sometimes also taught you how to live it. The project took 18 months to complete. Noah was there for every phase, from foundation to framing to the final inspections. He fought for quality materials and fought harder against corners that contractors wanted to cut. Evelyn backed him completely, even when it meant lower profit margins, even when investors complained. When the first families moved in, Noah and Ellie attended the block party. Watched kids play in the courtyard they'd designed for exactly that purpose. Saw parents who looked like the weight had lifted off their shoulders because they'd finally found housing they could afford without sacrificing everything else. "You did that," Evelyn said, standing beside him. "You built something that matters. We did that. You made it possible. You made it good." Ellie was playing with the other kids, her laughter carrying across the courtyard. She looked happy and healthy and completely at home. Noah thought about the frightened 7-year-old who used to worry about rent and medicine, and about this version who was confident enough to dream big. "She asked me last week if you were going to be her stepmom," Noah said. Evelyn's eyes went wide. What did you tell her? I told her that was up to you and me to figure out together, but that I hoped so. You hoped so? Yeah, I know it's fast and complicated, but when I try to imagine the future, you're in it. Both of you are in it, and I think that's worth figuring out, even if it's messy. Evelyn took his hand. I think that's worth figuring out, too. They stood there watching their future take shape in the form of a 7-year-old playing in a courtyard they'd built together, surrounded by homes they'd created for people who needed them. And Noah realized that this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the past or erasing the pain, but building something new that honored both where you'd been and where you were going. 2 years after the collapse, the city held a memorial service for those who'd died. 12 names read aloud, 12 families still grieving, 12 lives cut short by chance and physics and being in the wrong place when the ground gave way. Noah attended with Evelyn and Ellie. They stood in the crowd, listening to the names, and Noah thought about how easily his name could have been on that list, how easily both his and Evelyn's could have been there, leaving Ellie orphaned and a company without its CEO and all the things they'd built together unbuilt. After the service, they walked to the memorial that had been erected on the site of the collapse. A simple stone marker with the names engraved and a plaque explaining what had happened. Ellie placed flowers at the base like Noah had taught her. They didn't get to build anything, she said quietly. Like you did. They just died. Yeah, Bug, they did. That's not fair. No, it's not. Do you think about them? The people who didn't make it out? Noah crouched down beside her. All the time. Every time I work on a building or make something safe or help create housing for people who need it, I think about them. About how I got a second chance and they didn't, and I try to make that chance mean something. Ellie nodded seriously. That's good. I think that's what you're supposed to do. They walked home through the rebuilt Eastern District, past the housing project that was now fully occupied and thriving, past the new community center and the grocery store that had opened last month, past evidence of change and growth and people refusing to let disaster be the end of the story. That night, after Ellie was asleep, Noah sat with Evelyn on the balcony they'd sat on dozens of times before. I've been thinking about something, Evelyn said. Yeah? About what we tell people when they ask how we met. Right now, I just say we worked together, but that's not really the truth. What is the truth? That we saved each other, that we were both drowning in different ways before those tunnels, and somehow almost dying together taught us how to actually live. She paused. That sounds dramatic when I say it out loud. It's also accurate. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if that storm hadn't hit? If your shift had been different, or if I'd taken a different route home? Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on it. Why not? Because we can drive ourselves crazy thinking about all the ways things could have been different, the what-ifs and maybes. But the reality is that the storm did hit, and we did end up in those tunnels, and we did survive, and we built something real from that. That's what matters. Evelyn leaned her head against his shoulder. When did you become the philosophical one? Probably somewhere between the 3rd pizza dinner and the 20th time you helped Ellie with her math homework. She laughed. I'm terrible at math homework. She doesn't care. She just likes that you try. They sat in comfortable silence, and Noah thought about the strange architecture of their relationship. How it had been built on a foundation of survival and constructed through friendship and trust and the slow accumulation of shared moments. How it was stronger than anything he could have designed because it had been tested in ways most relationships never faced. I love you, Evelyn said suddenly. I don't think I've said that yet, but I do. I love you and I love Ellie, and I love this life we're building together, and I wanted you to know that. Noah's heart felt too big for his chest. I love you too. Have for a while now. Why didn't you say anything? I was waiting for the right moment. And this is it? Sitting on a balcony in a mediocre apartment building? This is perfect. And it was. Not because the setting was romantic or the timing was ideal, but because it was real. Because they were both fully present and honest and choosing each other without reservation. The following spring, on a Saturday morning that felt more like summer, Noah asked Evelyn to marry him. He did it in Ellie's school cafeteria during another art show, surrounded by second graders' projects and other parents drinking terrible coffee from paper cups. It wasn't fancy or elaborate, just a simple question asked in a place that mattered, because it represented the family they'd become. Evelyn said yes immediately, then laughed and cried at the same time. Ellie, who'd been in on the plan, jumped up and down and announced to anyone who would listen that Evelyn was officially going to be her stepmom. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the housing project they'd built together. It felt right to exchange vows there, surrounded by the physical evidence of what they'd created from destruction. The community showed up, dozens of families who'd found homes because Noah and Evelyn had refused to compromise on what mattered. Mrs. Kowalski cried through the entire ceremony. Ellie was the flower girl and took her job very seriously, making sure every petal was distributed evenly. Morrison served as Evelyn's best man because she said he'd earned it after years of putting up with her impossible demands. During his vows, Noah talked about the difference between survival and living, about how Evelyn had taught him that having enough wasn't the same as having what you needed, that security came from connection, not control, that the strongest thing you could do was admit you needed help. Evelyn's vows were shorter but more direct. She talked about learning what home meant, about discovering that family wasn't something you were born into but something you built with intention and care, about how loving someone meant trusting them with your worst moments and your biggest fears and believing they'd stay anyway. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause. Ellie announced that she was officially the luckiest kid ever because now she had a mom again. And Noah looked at his daughter and his wife and the community they'd helped build, and he understood that this was what recovery looked like. Not perfection, not the absence of pain or the erasure of loss, but the willingness to keep building even when the ground beneath you had proven unstable. The courage to trust that what you constructed mattered, even if nothing was guaranteed to last. At the reception, which was just a potluck in the community center courtyard, people took turns sharing stories. About finding housing when they'd been days from homelessness. About kids who could finally stay in the same school because rent was affordable. About neighbors becoming friends because the design of the buildings encouraged connection instead of isolation. One woman stood up and said that this place had saved her family, that she'd been about to give up before they got accepted into the housing program, that having a stable home had changed everything for her kids. Evelyn listened with tears in her eyes, and Noah knew she was understanding something she'd spent her whole life missing. That meaning didn't come from wealth or success or proving you were better than someone who doubted you. It came from using what you had to make life better for people who needed it, from building things that lasted not because they were impressive, but because they were necessary. As the sun set and the party continued, Ellie found Noah and Evelyn standing together watching the celebration. "This is the best day ever," she announced. "Yeah, Bug, it really is. Are you happy, Dad?" "Happier than I've been in a long time." "Good. You deserve to be happy." She grabbed both their hands. "All of us do." And standing there in the courtyard of a building they'd designed to be affordable and functional and community-focused, surrounded by people who'd found home in something they'd created, Noah finally understood what Sarah had tried to tell him in those last lucid moments before she died. That life was measured not in years, but in connections. Not in what you accumulated, but in what you built for others. Not in survival, but in the moments when you chose to keep living, even when it would have been easier to give up. The tunnels had taught him that lesson in the hardest way possible. But what came after, the rebuilding and the connection and the slow construction of a life that meant something, that was the lesson he'd carry forward. Because some people save your life by pulling you through flooded chambers and collapsed passages, keeping you conscious when you want to quit, refusing to leave you behind even when it would be easier. And some people teach you how to live it by showing you what's possible when you stop just surviving and start building something that matters. When you let yourself be vulnerable enough to love and be loved. When you use your worst moments as foundation for your best ones. Noah had learned both lessons from the same person, in the same impossible journey that had started with collapse and ended with construction. And standing there with Ellie on one side and Evelyn on the other, surrounded by evidence that surviving was just the beginning, he finally felt like he'd earned the second chance those tunnels had somehow given him. Not because he'd done anything heroic or extraordinary, but because he'd chosen to keep going, to keep building, to keep believing that tomorrow could be different from yesterday if you were willing to do the work of making it so. That was the real miracle. Not the survival itself, but what you built from it. Not the rescue, but what came after when you had to figure out how to actually live with the weight of a second chance. Some people save your life. And if you're lucky, really lucky, they also teach you how to live it, how to build something from ruins. how to turn survival into meaning, how to take the worst night of your life and somehow, impossibly, use it as foundation for the best years that followed. That was the gift. Not the rescue, but everything that came after. The slow, difficult, beautiful work of rebuilding not just structures, but lives. Of learning that strength wasn't about never falling apart, but about what you constructed from the pieces once you'd been broken. And as the celebration continued around them and Ellie chattered about her new family and the future they were building together, Noah looked at Evelyn and saw reflected back everything he'd learned in those dark tunnels and bright days that followed. That sometimes the people who save you are the ones who need saving just as much. That helping each other survive is just the first step. That the real work, the important work, comes later when you have to figure out how to turn survival into something worth having, into connection and meaning, and a life built with intention instead of just endured out of necessity, into home, into family, into a future constructed one choice at a time, one honest conversation at a time, one moment of choosing to stay even when leaving would be easier. That was what they'd built. Not just housing for families who needed it, but a life, a family, a future that honored both where they'd been and where they were going. That acknowledged the darkness without being defined by it, that used the worst moments as building blocks for the best ones. And standing there in the golden light of early evening, surrounded by people and laughter, and the evidence of what could be built from ruins, Noah finally understood the difference between surviving and living. Surviving was what you did in the tunnels. Living was what came after, when you took everything you'd learned in the darkness and used it to build something that could withstand the light.